Chapter 1127. Shweluorzi escaped. Once the sword fire profound was unleashed, the ultimate limitless sword formation was practically covered in flames. With Zhuo Wen as the center, the area of dozens of miles was actually covered in a terrifying sea of flames. Numerous flaming swords floated around Zhuo Wen, illuminating Zhuo Wen's cold and indifferent face, making him appear even more demonic. Shweluorzi, who was engulfed by the endless sword fire, let out a miserable shriek. His figure was constantly twitching in the flames, but he simply couldn't break free from the power of the sword fire. 10 core flaming swords shot out and pierced Shweluorzi's back. Shweluorzi's screams came to an abrupt end as he was pierced by the 10 core flaming swords and died. Zhuo Wen waved his sleeve, and the countless sword fires disappeared. Numerous long swords surrounded Zhuo Wen's body. Then, Zhuo Wen walked towards Shweluorzi step by step, his eyes as calm as water. 6th grade origin array? You're a 6th grade arcana master? No wonder you didn't hesitate to sell immortal stones at such a high price. At this moment, Shweluorzi was almost burnt to a crisp by the sword fire. However, as a peak celestial master, his vitality was naturally extremely strong. Although he looked miserable, he would not die immediately. Now that you know, I think you should know what to do, right? I'll give you the dignity of a warrior. Kill yourself. Zhuo Wen said indifferently as he slowly stood in front of Shweluorzi. Shweluorzi's eyes flashed viciously as he said coldly, "Don't think that your plan is flawless. If I die, my father, the blood butcher, will not let you go." With that, Shweluorzi folded his hands and slammed them in front of his forehead. With a muffled sound, Shweluorzi's eyes bulged and his vitality slowly faded away. However, his eyes were still fixed on Zhuo Wen. The resentment in his eyes made Zhuo Wen frown slightly. Shweluorzi had been severely injured by the sword fire ultimacy. He knew that even if he did not kill himself, he would be killed by Zhuo Wen. Since he was going to die anyway, he would rather commit suicide with dignity. I wonder if this guy's nascent soul was destroyed on its own. He frowned, feeling that something was wrong. He reached out with his right hand and pressed it against Shweluorzi's abdomen, sending his yuan qi into his dantian. After confirming that the nascent soul had indeed dissipated, he was relieved. No. How could the nascent soul power in Shweluorzi's dantian disappear so quickly? Even if he killed himself and destroyed his nascent soul, the power of his nascent soul shouldn't have dissipated so thoroughly in such a short period of time, right? Whoosh. A whistling sound rang in Zhuo Wen's ears. Immediately after, Zhuo Wen's pupils shrank as he discovered that the blood eye on Shweluorzi's forehead had turned into a bloody light and fled in the direction of Azura City. This guy didn't die? Where do you think you're going? Zhuo Wen was initially startled when he saw the blood glow break through the air. Soon after, he let out a furious roar. His feet pushed off the ground and he chased after the blood glow. At the same time, 3 pairs of lightning wings were formed and spread out with his hands. His speed was as fast as lightning. Bastard. Remember, I, Shweluorzi, will not let you go. Sensing that Zhuo Wen was chasing after him, the blood eye that had turned into a bloody light let out a hateful roar. Its speed soared again and it disappeared in front of Zhuo Wen's eyes almost instantaneously. Whoosh. Dozens of miles away, a thunderbolt flashed and turned into a figure. It was Zhuo Wen. The blood eye was too fast. After chasing for dozens of miles, Zhuo Wen lost track of it. What a cunning guy. He hid his nascent soul in the blood eye of his armor soul and directly left his body when I wasn't paying attention. Zhuo Wen's eyes flickered, and there was a trace of annoyance in his voice. The moment Shweluorzi's voice sounded, he had already determined that Shweluorzi's nascent soul was not in his dantian at all, but had been transferred to the blood eye of his armor soul. Shweluorzi's armor soul is quite strange. It can actually hide his nascent soul. If you don't pay attention, it's really difficult to notice that he's not dead. Xiao Hei's voice was filled with surprise. Let's go. Let's go to Xiang and see the result. Since Shweluorzi has escaped, I can't let the left and right protectors escape. Since the Splashing Blood Gang wants to kill me, I have to make them pay a certain price. Zhuo Wen said coldly. He turned around and rushed toward the area where Xiang and the left and right protectors were fighting. Boom! Boom! At that moment, the battle between Ziyang and the left and right protectors had reached its climax. However, Ziyang, who possessed the unfettered sword, was clearly suppressing the left and right protectors. As for the left and right protectors, they were barely holding on. Break! Xiang's long hair fluttered in the wind as he slashed the void with the freedom sword. The milky white halo on the surface of the sword became more and more blazing, and a terrifying power fell from the sky. Puff! Finally, the left and right protectors were like small boats that could capsize at any time in the ocean. They vomited blood and were blown away, unable to put up any resistance. Their presences had withered to the extreme. After defeating the left and right guardians, Ziyang did not show any mercy. In an instant, he arrived before the two of them. His right hand quickly tapped the acupoints on their chests, sealing their origin power within their bodies. They were unable to unleash any power at all. Master. After doing this, Xiang noticed Zhuowen slowly approaching. He quickly cupped his hands respectfully and continued, Master, where's Shueluozi? Humph. That guy hid his nascent soul in the blood eye and flew away. I was careless. Zhuowen snorted and said helplessly. However, when the left and right protectors heard this, they were quite shocked. A guy at the early stage of the Celestial Master Realm had forced Shueluozi to hide his nascent soul in the blood eye. This was Shueluozi's ultimate escape method, which he would only use in a life-and-death situation. However, Shueluozi had used this method in the face of a young man at the early stage of the Celestial Master Realm. Needless to say, the young man had forced Shueluozi into a life-and-death situation. Where did these two people come from? Feeling the terror of their master and servant, the left and right protectors looked at each other and licked their dry lips. Their hearts began to tremble. Originally, they had thought that they would be able to kill Xiang, but now, it had turned out this way. This was something that they had never expected. Master, what should we do with these two people? Xiang suddenly pointed at the left and right protectors and asked respectfully. Just kill them. Now we have to leave this place quickly. Shueluozi fled to Azura City. Obviously, he was going to inform the Bloody Butcher. Zhuowen said with a gloomy look. Ziyang nodded when he heard this. Immediately, he waved the unfettered sword in his right hand. Two milky white cold glows shot out and directly penetrated the heavenly spirit acupoints on the heads of the left and right protectors, completely destroying their life force. Let's go. Let's find a more secluded place and hide for a month. It just so happens that I need to use this month to refine the 7 orifices exquisite elixir. After a month, the limelight should be over. At that time, we can directly enter the Azura Blood Arena to seize the island's origin. After Xiang finished killing the left and right protectors, Zhuowen said something to him. Then, the two quietly left the place. In the Jiaoning auction house, the auction was unprecedentedly popular. This time, there were a total of 4 martial emperors bidding. At the same time, the Yama Crown Prince also participated in the bidding on behalf of Azura Lidi. For a time, the price of the Jade Fate Bow had almost reached a terrifying level. It had reached 50 million upper-grade spirit stones. 50 million upper-grade spirit stones. Is there anyone who is willing to increase the price? The corner of Lun Jia's mouth curved into an extremely wide smile. In fact, the auction house had already profited greatly from the Jade Fate Bow this time. However, she still underestimated the Jade Fate Bow's attractiveness to martial emperors. After all, this was a mid-level emperor weapon. Even mid-level martial emperors would have a fiery attitude towards this kind of treasure. In the entire Azura Island, the strongest person was Azura Lidi. However, Azura Lidi was only a 4th-level martial emperor. He had just stepped into the mid-level martial emperor realm. Naturally, he would have a great desire for a mid-level emperor weapon. The 4 martial emperors bidding this time were only low-level martial emperors. Their desire for the Jade Fate Bow was even greater than that of mid-level martial emperors. This time, the one who raised the price to 50 million upper-grade spirit stones was the Yama Crown Prince. This time, the Yama Crown Prince was ordered by Azura Lidi to bring 1/10 of Azura Bloodmana's wealth. The bloody butcher frowned. Even he was a little shocked by the Yama Crown Prince's bid. This was because he had only brought 55 million upper-grade spirit stones with him this time. As for the other 3 martial emperors, they were all silent and no longer bid. Clearly, they couldn't afford a price higher than 50 million upper-grade spirit stones. 55 million. The bloody butcher clenched his teeth and placed all of his wealth on the bid. The Yama Crown Prince frowned. His eyes flickered as he said, 56 million. Hearing this, the bloody butcher's expression turned slightly ugly. He knew that he couldn't afford the price anymore. His gaze became gloomy for a long time. Lun Jio's ability to read people's expressions was not bad. She immediately saw the strange expression on the bloody butcher's face. She shouted, "Is there anyone else who wants to increase the price?" Unfortunately, Lun Jio was met with silence. Even the bloody butcher didn't speak. Haha. I think Brother Lun Jio should be able to finalize the price this time. A price of 56 million should be pretty good. The Yama Crown Prince suddenly laughed. Although his laughter was rather casual, his heart was faintly aching. So many upper-grade spirit stones, it was almost equivalent to the Azura Blood Manor's annual income. However, it was all worth it to obtain the Jade Fate Bow. After all, a mid-grade Emperor artifact like this was something that could only be found by chance. Spending 56 million upper-grade spirit stones was actually worth it. Since there is no one else who wants to increase the price, then the Jade Fate Bow belongs to the Yama Crown Prince of the Azura Blood Manor. Congratulations. Lun Jio's words immediately caused a commotion. The Yama Crown Prince's smile grew even wider. The bloody butcher and the others' expressions became even more gloomy. However, they didn't dare to do anything to the Yama Crown Prince. After all, he had the entire Azura Blood Manor behind him. Whoosh. Chapter 1128. Late Stage Heavenly Master Realm Father, save me. A sharp voice resounded in the auction house, immediately attracting everyone's attention. Then, they saw a blood-red light suddenly appear in front of the bloody butcher. It was a strange blood-red eye. At this moment, the blood-red eye blinked in a very human-like manner, its eyes filled with panic. "My son, who did this to you?" The bloody butcher was stunned at first, then his eyes turned red. How could he not recognize that the blood-red eye was the armor soul of his son, Shweluorzi? Is it Shweluorzi? How did he end up in such a sorry state? Even his physical body is gone, leaving only a blood-red eye. The conversation between the bloody butcher and Shweluorzi was not loud, but everyone in the auction house heard it clearly. Many people were shocked by Shweluorzi's current state. It's that guy. The Emperor Realm expert beside him has an Emperor weapon. That kid is even more strange. He's only an early-stage Heavenly Master, but his battle strength is extremely terrifying. Shweluorzi recalled the scene just now, and fear and resentment rose in his heart. Oh! He has an Emperor weapon and an early-stage Heavenly Master brat. How did he manage to make you so miserable? The bloody butcher's eyes were extremely gloomy, and a murderous aura surged out of his body. Father! You must avenge me. My physical body has been destroyed by that brat. If it weren't for the blood-red eye, I wouldn't be able to see you now. Shweluorzi's voice became more and more resentful. Humph! The bloody butcher snorted coldly, and a terrifying Emperor Realm aura surged out. He said in a gloomy voice, "My son led the way. How dare he touch the people of the Splashing Blood Gang? I'll make him regret being born in this world. Father, come with me. I must avenge him. Otherwise, I won't be able to take this lying down." Shweluorzi was overjoyed. He flew out of the auction house in the form of the blood-red eye, and the bloody butcher followed closely behind. The father and son soon disappeared from everyone's sight. Let's go. Let's follow them and have a look. Many people in the auction house were puzzled as they exited the auction house and followed behind the blood butcher and his son. In fact, everyone had a vague idea that the one who had put Shweluorzi in such a difficult situation was the young man who had competed with Shweluorzi twice in the auction house. Based on the conversation between the father and son, many people guessed that Shweluorzi was unwilling to let the 7 orifices exquisite pill fall into the hands of others. Therefore, He and the two guardians of the bloody splashing gang tailed the two young men in order to kill them and seize the pill. Now that Schwerluoz's body had been destroyed, what would happen to the left and right guardians of the blood-splashing gang? These were two great emperors. Everyone was curious about the left and right protectors. Crown Prince, should we follow them and take a look? The black-robed elder beside the Yama Crown Prince whispered. The Yama Crown Prince nodded and chuckled. Let's go and take a look. The young man who was killed by Schwerluozi is probably not simple. He is only an early-stage heavenly master, yet he was able to force Schwerluozi into such a state. His battle strength is terrifying. His strength is indeed not bad, but he is still a far cry from you. If you were here, you could have killed Schwerluozi in one move, the black-robed elder said with a faint smile. Of course. The Yama Crown Prince lifted his chin and said proudly. After taking the Jade Fate bow, he followed the crowd in the direction where the Blood Butcher and Schwerluozi had left. Under Schwerluozi's lead, the Bloody Butcher quickly arrived at the scene of the incident. Behind them were a large group of people. When the Bloody Butcher arrived, all he saw was a mess. It was obvious that an unprecedented battle had taken place here. The Blood Butcher's face was gloomy. He glanced around the small hill and soon found two corpses in a remote corner. When the Blood Butcher came in front of the two corpses, the veins on his forehead bulged. He let out an oppressive roar, like a muffled thunder, echoing for dozens of miles. Don't let me find you. Once I find you, I will make you pay a price worse than death. Once the Bloody Butcher's roar rang out, it naturally attracted the attention of the gathered warriors. Their gazes were also cast towards the two corpses in front of the Bloody Butcher. Soon after, sounds of gasps rang out. The left and right protectors of the blood-splashing gang were first-level emperors. Now, they had died in front of them. They were great emperors. This is crazy. The blood-splashing gang only has 3 great emperors. Now that 2 of them have died, the blood-splashing gang will suffer a great loss. Many people looked at the Blood Butcher with pity in their eyes. The blood-splashing gang was ranked last among the 3 great powers of Azura City. Now that 2 of their great emperors had died, they probably didn't have the qualifications to compete with the other 2 great powers. Oh! The left and right protectors of the blood-splashing gang are also dead? The Yama Crown Prince and the black-robed old man, who had just arrived, happened to see this scene. Their eyes revealed a trace of caution. And this time, the main characters, Zhuo Wenjing and Zi Yang, were constantly flashing through a dense forest not far away from the small hill. They were looking for a hidden place where they planned to go into seclusion for a month. Master, there is a cave ahead, but it seems like there is a powerful meta beast living inside. Xiang's eyes lit up as he suddenly told Zhuowen. Let's go. Zhuowen nodded. Following Xiang's direction, the 2 of them increased their speed to the extreme. In less than half an incense stick's worth of time, they arrived at the cave Xiang had mentioned. The cave was at the side of a cliff. The entrance was covered by flowers and grass. If one didn't look carefully, it would be difficult to see that there was a cave inside. Let's go. The 2 of them directly entered the cave. The cave wasn't very deep. The 2 of them quickly reached the end of the cave. As Xiang had said, there was a meta beast hidden in the depths of the cave. However, the meta beast wasn't very strong. In a few moves, Xiang dealt with it. I will arrange an illusion formation at the entrance of the cave. With the illusion formation, even if someone comes to the entrance, it will be difficult to discover the existence of the cave. After saying that, Zhuowen took out the materials needed for the illusion formation from his spirit ring. After about 2 hours, he arranged a simple illusion formation and placed it at the entrance of the cave. Xiang, I need to go into seclusion for a month. Help me protect me. After arranging the illusion formation, Zhuowen returned to the cave and said to Xiang. Master, don't worry. Xiang will definitely do his best to protect you. Xiang nodded and said respectfully. Zhuowen nodded and took out a praying mat from his spirit ring. Sitting on it, he flicked his right hand and took out the 7 orifices exquisite pill. I hope that this thing won't disappoint me, Zhuowen muttered to himself. With a toss of his right hand, the 7 orifices exquisite pill was swallowed into his stomach. Boom! A thunderous sound rang out from Zhuowen's body. Soon after, Zhuowen felt a terrifying medicinal power spread out and spread through Zhuowen's meridians at a frightening speed. The instant the medicinal power spread through his body, Zhuowen could clearly feel his yuan power growing at a crazy speed. Kid. Control the medicinal power well. Don't waste it. The instant the medicinal power of the 7 orifices exquisite pill erupted, Xiao Hei's solemn voice rang out. Zhuowen nodded and calmed himself down. He began to control the medicinal power of the 7 orifices exquisite pill and gathered it in his dantian. When a certain amount was accumulated, Zhuowen knew that he would be able to break through to a higher level. On the 10th day, a thunderous sound rang out from Zhuowen's body. Xiang, who was sitting cross-legged not far from Zhuowen, was startled awake by this sound. He looked at Zhuowen, who was still sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, in astonishment. Has he broken through to the intermediate heavenly sovereign level? It seems like the effects of the 7 orifices exquisite pill are pretty good. Master has broken through in just 10 days. I wonder if he will be able to break through to the late heavenly venerate realm in the remaining 20 days. Xiang muttered to himself. He was very clear about the medicinal effects of the 7 orifices exquisite pill. Not only could it raise a cultivator's cultivation by 2 small realms, but it also had a 50% chance of raising a cultivator's cultivation to the heavenly venerate realm. It could be said that it was an extremely powerful pill. Cultivation knew no time. Another 19 days passed. Seeing that the battle for the source of Azura Island was tomorrow, Xiang anxiously looked at Zhuowen, who was still sitting cross-legged. I wonder if Master will be able to break through today. If he can't, I will have to wake him up in advance. Xiang muttered helplessly. Back then, Zhuowen had already reminded him that he had to wake him up before the battle for the source of the island. Therefore, Xiang began to hesitate. Should he wake Zhuowen up now? Boom boom boom. Suddenly, 3 low thunderous sounds rang out. Zhuowen abruptly opened his eyes, and an aura several times more powerful than before flowed out. It actually swept up a slight gale in the entire cave. Master, you broke through? Xiang's eyes lit up as he asked. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled up. He nodded and smiled. I was lucky enough to break through to the late heavenly venerate realm. Xiang, how long have I been in seclusion? 29 days. Tomorrow is the battle for the source of the island. Xiang said in a low voice. Zhuowen nodded. It seems that there is still 1 more day. Before Zhuowen could finish speaking, the ice saint rune in his left hand moved strangely. A wave of frightening cold chi surged out and formed a rather frightening snowstorm in the somewhat narrow cave. It's the little guy. Feeling the change in the Saint Ice rune, Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He immediately thought of the profound soul ice butterfly. A month ago, he had placed the heart of the Ice Luan into the Saint Ice rune for the profound soul ice butterfly to refine. A month later, the Saint Ice rune sent out such a change. Clearly, the profound soul ice butterfly had successfully refined the heart of the Ice Luan. The profound soul ice butterfly is about to break through. Boy, let it out. Chapter 1129. Standing Azura Boom. Terrifying cold chi erupted, and soon after, the entire cave was filled with a snowstorm. In the center of the snowstorm, the profound soul ice butterfly let out a shrill cry, and a pair of thin wings suddenly spread out. A terrifying aura flowed out, and the aura of the profound soul ice butterfly also rose, almost reaching its limit. Bang! With a low muffled sound, the aura of the profound soul ice butterfly had reached an extremely terrifying level. It broke through. The profound soul ice butterfly's aura has soared from the sovereign level to the golden sovereign level. Zhuowen looked at the profound soul ice butterfly, whose aura had become stronger, in astonishment. It seemed that the effect of the heart of the Ice Luan was not bad. The aura is still strengthening. Does this profound soul ice butterfly plan to break through again? Looking at the profound soul ice butterfly, whose aura was still strengthening, Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he whispered in astonishment. An adult Ice Luan has the cultivation of an Empyrean. The energy contained within is not something you can imagine. Perhaps this little fellow has obtained quite a bit of benefits from the heart of the Ice Luan. Xiao Hei's voice slowly rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen nodded, his eyes revealing excitement as he stared at the profound soul ice butterfly in the sky. If the latter could really break through to the Empyrean level, it would naturally be of great help to Zhuowen. Zhuowen and Xiang retreated to the entrance of the cave and silently watched the profound soul ice butterfly break through. Xiang's eyes revealed shock. He had clearly recognized the identity of the profound soul ice butterfly. This was a meta beast that had the potential to become a demon emperor, and the bloodline in its body was extremely high. He never thought that Zhuowen would actually possess such a meta beast. After about half an incense stick of time, the profound soul ice butterfly actually broke through to the early Empyrean level, and the terrifying cold chi finally came to an abrupt stop. Yeah. The black soul ice butterfly let out a long cry. Soon after, it landed beside Zhuowen and obediently rubbed itself against Zhuowen's chest. Its 5 colored eyes were filled with affection. Zhuowen patted the profound soul ice butterfly's head, but his eyes revealed a trace of emotion. This profound soul ice butterfly's talent was truly blessed by the heavens. As long as it had enough cold chi, the barrier of cultivation realm was not a problem in front of this little fellow. Kid, don't overlook this little guy's potential. You didn't look for cold chi in the past, so this little guy's cultivation has stagnated. It's not like you humans, who rely on cultivation step by step. Instead, it relies on cold chi to increase its cultivation. If there is enough cold chi, this little guy can reach the peak of the Celestial Master Realm in a short time. If there is some opportunity, he can directly advance to the Emperor Realm and become a Demon Emperor, Blackie said very seriously. Zhuowen nodded. Xiao Hei was right. He had indeed neglected the growth of the profound soul ice butterfly, which led to the little fellow's cultivation not increasing much after following him for so long. It seems that I really need to properly cultivate this little fellow. Zhuowen nodded and sighed. The mystic soul ice butterfly's breakthrough was over, and the terrifying snowstorm in the cave had completely stopped. Master, we killed the left and right protectors of the Splashing Blood Gang and destroyed Xueluoz's body. The Splashing Blood Gang won't let us off easily. It will be difficult for us to enter Azura City tomorrow, Xiang said with a frown. Zhuowen nodded and said indifferently, I know what to do. Tomorrow, I will enter Azura City alone. When the battle for the island's origin begins, the Splashing Blood Gang won't send too many people to search for us. At that time, you just need to wait for an opportunity to enter Azura City and wait for my orders. Hearing this, Xiang nodded and didn't refuse. He knew that Zhuowen had the 100 Transformation Divine Art, a mystical secret technique that could change one's appearance and aura. Therefore, he didn't feel that it was inappropriate for Zhuowen to sneak into Azura City. The night passed silently. On the second day, at the first glimmer of dawn, Zhuowen woke up from his cultivation state. He walked out of the cave and headed straight for Azura City. At the same time, his appearance slowly changed. His originally fair face became as dark as charcoal. Even the aura on his body became completely different from before. Even if Xiang was by Zhuowen's side, it would be difficult for him to recognize Zhuowen's true appearance. When he arrived at the gate of Azura City, Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and discovered that in addition to the city guards, there was another team. This team was dressed in blood-red clothes and had the insignia of the Splashing Blood Gang on them. At this moment, this group of people wearing blood-red clothes were staring at the people queuing at the city gate with dark and stern gazes. They were also holding a portrait in their hands. On the portrait, there were 2 people's heads. Zhuowen saw them from afar. Weren't these 2 heads him and Ziyang? That Splashing Blood Gang really won't let this go, Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. However, his expression was extremely calm. After using the 100 transformation technique, he wasn't afraid of being recognized by the Splashing Blood Gang. The team slowly moved forward. Soon, it was Zhuowen's turn. The leader of the Splashing Blood Gang stopped him and compared him to the portrait before letting him pass. After smoothly entering Azura City, Zhuowen discovered that Azura City was much more lively than a month ago. The battle for the island's source is about to begin. It is said that the island master, Azura Lidi, has already entered the Azura Blood Arena and is personally presiding over this stage of the battle. This year's battle for the source seems to be much more intense than before. It is said that the geniuses of the other tribes on Azura Island have all gathered in Azura City. Even some geniuses from other islands have come. I wonder how many lucky people will be able to obtain the island's source. My guess is that there are close to 1,000 young geniuses participating in this competition, but only 3 will be able to obtain the island's source. This is truly the case of the strong weeding out the weak. As soon as Zhuoan entered Azura City, the discussions in the surroundings were all about the battle for the island's source. The degree of fervor almost made Zhuoan smack his tongue. Everywhere he went, he could hear people discussing this topic. Let's go to the Azura Blood Arena. After Zhuoan casually listened to the discussions around him, he took a step forward and headed straight for the Azura Blood Arena. The flow of people in the Azura Blood Arena was much more terrifying than in other places of Azura City. At a glance, there was a sea of people. It was almost impossible to see the end of the sea of people. However, these people were basically spectators. The real contestants had another passage that led directly to the inside of the Azura Blood Arena. After asking a few questions in the Azura Blood Arena, he came to the passage exclusive to the contestants. At the entrance of the passage, he showed the Azura medal and entered the Azura Blood Arena unimpeded. After passing through a long corridor, Zhuoan appeared in the vast yellow land inside the Azura Blood Arena. At this moment, the 10 blood-red platforms on the yellow land had disappeared. At a glance, they were all yellow. In other places of the yellow land, there was also a large number of young warriors gathered. These warriors should be the contestants participating in the battle for the island's source. What surprised Zhuoan was that these young contestants were all celestial masters. The weakest among them was at the initial stage of the Celestial Master Realm. Among them, there were more than a dozen at the peak of the Celestial Master Realm. Among the nearly 1,000 martial artists, the dozen or so peak Empyrean martial artists were the most eye-catching. Everyone knew that there were only 3 spots for the island's source, so they would definitely be selected from the dozen or so martial artists with the strongest cultivations. Among them, the most eye-catching ones were the Yama Crown Prince of the Azura Blood Mansion, Lun Jiao of the Jenning Auction House, the domineering Diba, and the gloomy Xue Luozi of the Splashing Blood Gang. Zhuoan narrowed his eyes and stared at Xue Luozi. He was a little surprised. Xue Luozi's body had been destroyed by him a month ago, but he had rebuilt his body so quickly. It seemed that the Bloody Butcher had spent a lot of effort on him. Moreover, Zhuoan faintly felt that Xue Luozi's aura seemed to be stronger than a month ago. He wondered what method the Bloody Butcher had used to restore Xue Luozi, whose body had been destroyed, to such a perfect state. However, at this moment, Zhuoan really did not put Xue Luozi in his eyes. When he was at the initial stage of the Celestial Master Realm, he had already destroyed Xue Luozi's body. Now that his cultivation had reached the late stage of the Celestial Master Realm, he would definitely crush Xue Luozi. The opponents that Zhuoan was most afraid of this time should be Diba and Yama Crown Prince, especially Yama Crown Prince. This person's strength should be above Diba's. After all, he had not entered the Emperor Realm, but he had the strength of the Emperor Realm. This was enough to show that this person was extraordinary. Around the Yellow Earth, there were extremely thick and tall walls. These tall walls surrounded the entire Yellow Earth arena in a ring shape. On the high walls, there were densely packed seats. At this moment, these seats were basically filled with people. Many people stood up one after another and cheered loudly. Whoosh! Whoosh! Sonic booms suddenly burst out from the sky above the Azura Blood Arena. The sharp sound of tearing air resounded in the sky above the Azura Blood Arena, causing many people in the seats to cover their ears with their hands as fear appeared in their eyes. Very quickly, 3 figures appeared in the sky above the Azura Blood Arena. The person in the lead was wearing a long robe that alternated between black and red. Many human figures that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws were drawn on the robe. It looked rather strange. It's the master of Azura Blood Manor, Lady Azura. As soon as the 3 figures appeared in the sky above the arena, there was an uproar in the surroundings. Most of the people's eyes fell on the person in the lead. Zhuoan raised his head slightly. His gaze also landed on this Azura standing on the ground. This person was not very old, appearing to be in his 30s. The strange thing was that this person's pupils were red, while the whites of his eyes were black. It was extremely compatible with the color of the long robe he wore. In particular, the terrifying aura of this person was as vast as the sea. When it leaked out, Zhuowen faintly felt a sense of trepidation, as if a bayonet had landed on his heart. Chapter 1130. Physical strength of the two people standing behind Azura Li Di. One wore a blood-red robe and his eyes were bloodthirsty. Zhuowen was no stranger to this person. He was the leader of the blood-splashing gang, Bloody Butcher. The other person was an old man with a head full of white hair and an amiable smile on his face. Zhuowen didn't need to guess to know that this old man was the president of the Jianing auction house, Lun He. The arrival of the three giants of Azura City immediately attracted the attention of countless people in the Azura Blood Arena. The originally noisy crowd on the high platform also stopped clamoring. For a moment, the entire Azura Blood Arena fell into a strange silence. Everyone should know that today is the day of the Azura Island's source eruption. Every time the Azura Island erupts, there are only 3 source eruptions. In other words, only 3 cultivators can obtain the Azura Island's source eruption. This time is no exception. Azura Li Di slowly opened his mouth. His low and hoarse voice was like the sound of a demon. It lingered in the air and resounded in everyone's ears. Hearing this, many of the participating cultivators in the yellow earth trembled. Although they were mentally prepared, when they heard that there were only 3 spots, they still felt a little embarrassed. There were nearly 1,000 cultivators, but only 3 could successfully obtain the source eruption. It had to be said that the elimination rate was too high. I won't beat around the bush. The island's source eruption is tens of thousands of feet below the yellow earth. There is a strange space there. Every time the island's source eruption, 3 source eruptions will appear in that space. At the same time, countless blood crystals will erupt from that space. If you are lucky, you may be able to obtain the source of the blood crystals. As Azura Li Di spoke, he shook his sleeve. Immediately, a dark light swept out from his sleeve. Then, it turned into a spiral-shaped building that looked like a sharp drill bit in the air above the Azura Blood Arena. Press down. Azura Li Di stretched out his right hand and the huge spiral-shaped building was caught in his hand. Then, he ruthlessly slammed it into the center of the yellow earth. Bang! The spiral-shaped building fell from the sky and heavily slammed into the center of the yellow earth. Under this terrifying force, the building plunged into the center of the yellow earth. Then, with a dazzling speed, it plunged into the depths of the earth. Moreover, Zhuowen's keen senses discovered that the moment the spiral-shaped building drilled into the ground, it emitted a black and red light. Then, under the eyes of the crowd, the building began to grow until it was tens of thousands of feet long. Azura Li Di. Azura Li Di. The Azura Li Di. Azura Li Di. A Li Di Azura Li Di. Azura Li Di. This is the real Azura Blood Arena. It goes from the surface to tens of thousands of feet deep. In the Azura Blood Arena, there are Azura gates. Every time you blast open a Azura gate, you will enter another narrow space. In this narrow space, you will definitely meet at least one opponent. After defeating your opponent, you will continue to blast open the next Azura gate, Azura Li Di said slowly. He explained the rules of the real Azura Blood Arena. Everyone revealed a look of understanding. The Azura Blood Arena went down layer by layer. The space would become narrower and narrower. The remaining warriors would also become more and more terrifying. The competition would also become more and more intense. In the end, the strongest 3 would be selected. Zhuowen also revealed a look of understanding. When he first entered the Azura Blood Arena, his first impression was that it was too ordinary. It was not much different from an ordinary arena. With Azura Li Di's strength and status, it should not be possible. He also did not need to spend so much effort to create such an ordinary arena. Now, he realized that the real Azura Blood Arena had always been with Azura Li Di. Swoosh, swoosh. Azura Li Di waved his sleeve. Nearly 1,000 blood rays flew out and attached themselves to everyone's forehead. He said indifferently, "This is an Azura talisman. If you are defeated during the battle, you can use the Azura talisman to teleport yourself out of the Azura blood arena. Of course, the result of this is naturally elimination." Zhuowen only felt a heat between his eyebrows. Soon after, a blood-red pattern appeared between his eyebrows. This should be the so-called Azura talisman. Moreover, Zhuowen could also feel that this Azura talisman contained a trace of spatial power. This Azura Li Di should be right. By relying on this Azura talisman, they could indeed teleport themselves out of the Azura blood arena. Let's start now. At this moment, the strange space tens of thousands of feet underground should have already nurtured 3 island sources. Whoever is stronger will be qualified to obtain the island sources. Go! Azura Li Di waved his sleeve and said indifferently, "Swoosh, swoosh." As soon as Azura Li Di's words came out, nearly 1,000 warriors in the yellow earth turned into afterimages. They rushed towards the countless Azura gates exposed on the surface of the Azura blood arena. Each of them chose an Azura gate and used brute force to shatter it. They directly rushed into the Azura gate. Zhuowen arrived in front of an inconspicuous Azura gate. His right hand condensed a trace of Buddhist power. He punched out and shattered the Azura gate. With a stomp of his foot, he entered the depths of the Azura blood arena. As soon as he entered, Zhuowen felt that the gravity inside was stronger than outside. His body could not help but become sluggish and his shoulders stiffened. However, after circulating Yuan power around his body, Zhuowen slowly adapted to the environment of the Azura blood arena. Looking around, Zhuowen realized that the space of the Azura blood arena was completely blood-red. The place he was in was similar to a secret chamber. On the other side of this space, there was another Azura gate. Boom! Before Zhuowen could size up the Azura gate in front of him, traces of cracks appeared on the surface of the Azura gate. Shortly after, it burst open. An extremely muscular figure walked out from the back of the Azura gate, cursing and swearing. This person was extremely tall. He was almost twice as tall as Zhuowen. When Zhuowen stood in front of this person, he only reached the person's chest. Moreover, this person's muscles were extremely well developed. They bulged and bulged, looking extremely terrifying. Boom, boom, boom. This person walked over step by step. Every step he took caused the space to tremble violently. It was as if a small earthquake had occurred. Bang! When he arrived 10 meters in front of Zhuowen, this person stretched out his right hand and slammed the 2-meter-long heavy sword on his back onto the ground. Immediately, the ground shook even more violently. However, Zhuowen stood quietly in the same place. He was as immovable as a boulder. This tall and muscular man's cultivation was not bad. He was also in the late heavenly venerable realm, which was similar to Zhuowen's. Coupled with his terrifying appearance, even cultivators of the same level would be somewhat traumatized by this person. This would affect their performance. The muscular man held the heavy sword in his right hand. He stared at Zhuowen with a mocking gaze and said, "I say, kid, our cultivation is about the same. However, looking at your thin arms and legs, your combat strength should not be much. If you don't want to die, I advise you to activate the Azura talisman and get out of here. You don't have the qualifications to tell me to get out. The one I want to get out of here is you, not me," Zhuowen said indifferently. The muscular man scratched his head and sneered, "It looks like you really aren't afraid of death. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being ruthless. If I accidentally kill you later, don't blame me for not warning you in advance." As he spoke, the muscular man strode forward. Although he was walking, each step he took was equivalent to 4 or 5 steps of an ordinary person, so his speed was fast to the point of being dazzled. Moreover, Zhuowen was keenly aware of the strong killing intent in this man's eyes. Obviously, this muscular man intended to take his life as soon as he stepped forward. Die! The burly man let out a shrill cry. The heavy sword brought with it a frightening whistling sound as it descended from the sky, slashing straight at Zhuowen. The heavy sword was simply too large and heavy. As it slashed down, it actually caused countless fierce winds to howl in the surroundings. 7 kills. Zhuowen waved his right hand and the 7 kills saber landed in his palm. At the same time, 3 pairs of lightning wings grew out from his back. He stomped his feet and turned into a bolt of lightning, instantly circling to the muscular man's side. Boom! Terrifying power poured down, and the heavy sword smashed into the ground, causing the ground to begin to crack. Terrifying cracks appeared, and the entire space began to tremble once again. Kill! Zhuowen, who had circled to the muscular man's side, shouted loudly. The 7 kills saber was infused with the killing force. He suddenly swept to the muscular man's back and slashed down with the saber. Clang! To Zhuowen's horror, the muscular man's skin was like steel. When the 7 kills saber slashed on the surface of his skin, it actually produced a metallic sound. It was actually unable to break through the man's physical defense. Haha! My physical body is comparable to a royal spiritual treasure. Even a royal spiritual treasure won't be able to break through my physical body. You can't do anything to me, but I can slowly torture you to death. The muscular man grinned hideously and swung his right hand. The heavy sword that had smashed onto the ground drew an arc and whizzed toward Zhuowen behind him, wanting to completely tear him apart. Retreat! Zhuowen suddenly retreated dozens of steps, barely dodging the terrifying heavy sword. His eyes gradually narrowed. You can't break through my physical body. What do you have to compete with me? You'd better get lost while it's still early. The muscular man swung the heavy sword and placed it on his shoulder. He stared at Zhuowen mockingly. It seems that the island's origin battle is indeed full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Although your cultivation is only at the advanced stage of the Celestial Master Realm, your strength is already comparable to a warrior at the peak of the Celestial Master Realm. Zhuowen slowly said. Of course. The brawny man smiled contentedly. Zhuowen's words made him feel very happy in his heart. However, compared to me, there's still a huge gap. Since you're so proud of your physical body, then I'll fight with you head-on. Let's see whose physical body is stronger. However, Zhuowen's next words caused the muscular man's smile to disappear. He looked at Zhuowen as if he was looking at an idiot. Was this kid crazy? His physical body was comparable to a royal spiritual treasure, but this guy actually wanted to fight with him head-on. He was simply courting death. However, what happened next made him abandon this idea. Great Sun Nirvana Fate. Chapter 1131. Azura Gate. Looking at the 3-jongtall Zhuowen who had transformed into a 4-headed, 8-armed man, the burly man's eyes were a little dazed. He actually felt a tinge of fear and trepidation in his heart. At this moment, the pressure that Zhuowen gave him was extremely strong. That 3-jongtall body and the blazing golden light gave him a feeling that he could not resist. Kill! Zhuowen, who had transformed into a 4-headed, 8-armed man, roared and took a step forward. His entire body turned into a streak of golden lightning as he rapidly stepped towards the burly man. The burly man frowned slightly, but he did not show any signs of fear. His right hand held the hilt of his sword as he suddenly pulled it out. With a wild howl of the wind, he kicked the ground and shot out like a cannonball. Boom! The burly man's movements were rather nimble. He took advantage of Zhuowen's bosom and swung his heavy sword horizontally from the side, blasting towards Zhuowen's abdomen with a sharp whistling sound as if the air was being torn apart. Zhuowen grunted coldly as he stretched out his right arm that glowed with golden light, and then he suddenly swung it horizontally like a shield to block the heavy sword that slashed towards him, causing the sound of metal colliding to erupt. Feeling the huge force coming from the heavy sword, the burly man frowned slightly. His empty left hand was like a poisonous snake as it craftily swept towards Zhuowen's chest and abdomen. A surge of yuan qi swept out from the fingertips of his left hand, forming a sharp claw made out of qi. Boom! Unfortunately, Zhuowen's other arm quickly grabbed the burly man's left hand and then suddenly twisted it. A rather miserable cry rang out. Then, the burly man was shocked to find that his left hand had been directly broken by Zhuowen's huge force and was hanging down powerlessly. Don't forget, I have 8 arms. Zhuowen's indifferent voice rang out. The moment he broke the burly man's left hand, an extremely dazzling golden light erupted from his remaining 6 arms and blasted towards the burly man. The terrifying huge force caused an extremely frightening hissing sound to ring out in the surroundings. "No. I admit defeat. Let me go." Feeling the strong whistling sound of the wind blowing in his face, the burly man's eyes were filled with fear, and he couldn't help but loudly beg for mercy and admit defeat. Unfortunately, Zhuowen was unmoved, and his 6 arms continued to press forward. When the burly man made his move earlier, he had intended to kill Zhuowen. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. It was obvious that he intended to kill Zhuowen in this Azura bloody arena. Since the other party intended to kill him, Zhuowen would not be polite. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Boom. The muffled sound of fist force entering flesh resounded. Immediately, 6 terrifying forces exploded within the burly man's body. The burly man suddenly spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His face became pale and bloodless. His entire body became soft and limp on the ground as though it had no bones. His breathing became extremely heavy. The 6 fist forces were extremely terrifying. Moreover, Zhuowen's 6 punches had struck the 6 vital points of the burly man, directly cutting off his life force. Slowly withdrawing his hand, Zhuowen looked indifferently at the burly man lying limp on the ground. He knew that the burly man, whose life force had been cut off by the fist forces, would not live for long. Therefore, he did not continue to attack. Instead, he strode towards the Azura gate that had just appeared. In the Azura bloody arena, every time an opponent was defeated, a new Azura gate would appear in the barrier ahead. Entering the new Azura gate, one would naturally encounter the elites who had survived the first battle. Only by winning again and again could one finally reach the strange space tens of thousands of feet below the Azura bloody arena and obtain the island's source. At this moment, on the surface of the Azura bloody arena, there were streaks of blood-red light constantly flashing, revealing figures. These figures were the warriors who had been defeated and eliminated in the Azura bloody arena. Most of them had a dejected look on their faces as they walked towards the corners of the yellow earth, silently observing the warriors who had yet to be eliminated. This was because in the sky above the Azura bloody arena, there was a blood-red light screen. This light screen was divided into countless small sections, and each section displayed a battle. Clearly, it was the scene of the warriors who had passed the first battle and advanced to the second battle. Among them, the most eye-catching were 4 people. These 4 people were Yama Crown Prince, Diba, Lun Jiao, and Xue Luozi. In every battle, the 4 of them finished off their opponents in an extremely clean manner. They were the first to arrive at the next Azura gate, silently waiting for their opponents to arrive. As for Zhuowen, his performance was not too eye-catching. Even in battle, he did not finish off his opponents in one move like Yama Crown Prince and the other 3. Instead, he fought casually, and at the same time, he honed his slaughter oath-breaking saber technique. After all, he was not very proficient in the slaughter saber technique. If he could use his opponents to hone his skills, his improvement would naturally be faster. It seems like the 3 spots this time will be among the 4 of them. Azura Standing Ground's gaze was basically focused on Yama Crown Prince and the other 3. As for the others, he was too lazy to look at them. This Diba is not simple. It is said that he came from the outer court of splendid Spirit Island. Moreover, he is a monstrous genius who ranks second on the outer court heavenly master list. I'm afraid that he will be a strong competitor for Yama Crown Prince, Xue Luozi, and Lun Jiao. Lun He smiled faintly. Diba is still not a match for Yama Crown Prince. However, Xue Luozi and Lun Jiao should be careful. Especially Xue Luozi. I heard that a mysterious youth destroyed his physical body a month ago. His strength should have been greatly reduced, right? Azura Standing Ground said meaningfully. There is such a thing. Xue Luozi's strength is enough to rank in the top 3 among the younger generation in Azura City. How could he be so battered by a nameless youth? Lun He was slightly surprised. Bloody Butcher's gaze was gloomy. He coldly snorted and said, "That guy used some despicable means to injure my son. Let's not talk about this matter anymore." Seeing Bloody Butcher's perfunctory attitude, Lun He's eyes revealed a hint of contemplation. He then smiled mischievously and said, "Even if it was a sneak attack, He shouldn't be weak to be able to force Xue Luozi into such a state. He should also be participating in the competition for the island's origin, right? That little bastard won't dare to come. I have arranged many people outside the city. If he enters the city, I will know immediately. At that time, it will be his doomsday, Bloody Butcher said coldly. That's a pity. If that guy had participated in the competition, it would have been quite interesting. Lun He smiled meaningfully. Bloody Butcher coldly stared at Lun He and said, Lun He, what do you mean? Nothing. Let's continue to watch the competition. After 4 rounds, the competition will become extremely fierce. At that time, the competition will reach its climax. At that time, we will know who will be eliminated. Lun He shook his head and said with a smile. Bloody Butcher frowned slightly, but his heart sank to the extreme. Xue Luozi's body had not been rebuilt for a long time. Although the aura of this body was stronger than before, Xue Luozi had not had time to adapt to the new body. Therefore, the strength that he could display was weaker than before. Therefore, Bloody Butcher began to worry that Xue Luozi would be eliminated by Yama Crown Prince, Diba, and Lun Jia. After another 2 rounds of battles, Zhuo Wen stepped into the 4th Azura Gate. He knew that after 3 rounds of elimination, there would only be about 100 warriors left. Zhuo Wen also knew that the remaining 100 warriors were the true elites of the Azura Gate. Their battle prowess was much stronger than the average warrior. Boom! The Shura Gate on the side was instantly broken, and a slender figure appeared. This figure was actually a woman with a graceful figure. She was wearing a red cheongsam. The tight clothes outlined her extremely seductive figure. Her lips were cherry red, and a seductive aura exuded from her body. Deng deng deng. The woman also saw Zhuowen in front of her. Her round eyes gently blinked at Zhuowen, and a ripple of lust sprouted in the entire space. Brother, you are so fast. You actually reached here faster than me. You must be very powerful. A sweet voice that could make one's heart soften slowly came out of the woman's mouth. Zhuowen could not help but feel a trace of numbness in his heart. Deng 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 deng, deng deng deng. Very quickly, the lady in the cheongsam arrived in front of Zhuo Wen. Her pure white and soft hands were placed on Zhuo Wen's shoulders. A refreshing fragrance assailed his nostrils, causing Zhuo Wen's eyes to narrow as he revealed a comfortable expression. At the same time, the flames of lust in his heart were ignited by this fragrance, causing Zhuo Wen's cheeks to turn slightly red as a faint crimson color rose in his eyes. Brother, what's the point of fighting and killing? Wouldn't it be better if we did something more enjoyable? The woman in the cheongsam stuck out her tongue like an orchid. Her sweet voice and warm and soft hands caressed the desire in Zhuowen's heart. Looking at Zhuowen's appearance, the woman in the cheongsam revealed a trace of a feminine smile. Soon after, a cold light swept out from her palm and swept towards Zhuowen's neck. Clang! However, when this cold light reached Zhuowen's neck, it actually stopped abruptly. Moreover, it even emitted the sound of metal clashing. The woman in the cheongsam was shocked to discover that Zhuowen's neck revealed a trace of a blazing golden light. Her Shorekill attack was actually unable to pierce through this golden light. Have you always used this method to win before? The instant the woman in the cheongsam revealed a stunned expression, Zhuowen's calm voice slowly sounded out, causing the woman's heart to be in chaos. She secretly felt that something was wrong. Her jade-like feet tapped on the ground as she planned to fly away. You plan to run after a sneak attack. Do you think there is such a thing as a cheap shot? Zhuowen's dense voice sounded out. His right hand grabbed the woman's jade-like arm. Following which, a powerful force exploded. One could only hear a catcher sound resounding out. The woman's seemingly boneless right arm was directly crushed by Zhuowen's violent force. Poochie. The woman let out a sharp blood-curdling scream. She decisively waved the dagger in her right hand and cut off her left arm that was being pinched. Accompanied by a violent spurt of blood, she continuously retreated dozens of steps. Her face was pale as she looked at Zhuowen. You weren't charmed by me from the beginning? That was all an illusion that you displayed. The woman in the cheongsam stared at Zhuowen in front of her with a deathly pale face and said in a low voice. Zhuoan was a little surprised by the decisiveness of the woman in the Cheongsam. He nodded and said, "This trick of yours can only be said to be a little low-level. It won't work on me at all. You win." Chapter 1132. Long when after the Cheongsam woman left, Zhuoan resolutely blasted away the Shura gate in front of him. The next two Shura gates he encountered were not too difficult for Zhuoan to deal with. After entangling with them for a while, Zhuoan easily defeated them and successfully reached the bottom of the Azura blood arena. At the bottom of the Azura blood field, there was a blood-colored rock space. In the center of this space, there was a blood-colored sphere that was about 100 feet in size. Thick blood-colored tubes extended from the sphere. There were a total of 12 tubes, and at the end of each tube, there were 12 Azura gates. After arriving at this space, Zhuoan raised his head and looked at the huge blood-red sphere in the center of the space with a hint of surprise in his eyes. The island's origin is in this blood-red sphere. Moreover, there are only 3 origin powers. There are a total of 12 people who have reached this place. If you want to obtain the 3 origin powers, then fight to your heart's content and eliminate your opponents. A strong voice resounded in this space. Zhuoan's eyes narrowed. He was naturally familiar with this voice. It belonged to Azura Lady. Upon hearing this, Zhuoan noticed that there were 11 other people in this space. All of them were at the peak of the Celestial Master Realm. Only Zhuoan, who was at the Advanced Celestial Master Realm, stood out among the 12 people. You're lucky to reach the bottom of the Azura Blood Arena at the Advanced Celestial Master Realm. Xue Luozi, who happened to be standing not far from Zhuoan, stared at Zhuoan with his scarlet eyes. At this moment, Zhuoan's appearance was that of a young man with a charcoal-black face. Therefore, Xue Luozi did not recognize Zhuoan even though he was standing in front of Zhuoan. Zhuoan glanced at Xue Luozi indifferently and said, "I'll be lucky if I meet you." Hearing this, Xue Luozi narrowed his eyes and sneered, "It seems that you are very confident in yourself. If you really meet me, I will let you know the taste of death." Zhuoan couldn't be bothered to pay attention to Xue Luozi. He wasn't afraid of Xue Luozi even before his breakthrough. Now that his cultivation had jumped 2 levels, Xue Luozi was even less of a match for him. Xue Luozi naturally felt Zhuoan's disregard, and his eyes darkened. He was already in a bad mood when his body was destroyed by Zhuoan a month ago. Now that a late-stage heavenly master dared to ignore him, his killing intent began to soar. "You'd better pray that you don't meet me next time. Otherwise, the consequences will be very serious," Xue Luozi said coldly, his eyes fixed on the blood-red ball in front of him. The others didn't pay attention to Xue Luozi and Zhuoan. Most of their attention was on the blood-red ball, which contained their ultimate goal of participating in the Azura Blood Arena. The island's origin was something that could improve one's martial aptitude and cultivation. It was of great benefit to warriors. "Go in," a deep voice rang out. Yama Crown Prince took a step forward and turned into a shadow, rushing towards one of the Shura gates. Boom! With a punch, the Shura gate was smashed into pieces. Yama Crown Prince entered the Shura gate without hesitation. Whoosh! 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 The moment Yama Crown Prince entered the Shura gate, Diba, Lun Jiao, and the others also chose a Shura gate and broke through it. "I hope I'm lucky enough to meet you." Hee hee. Xue Luozi glanced at Zhuoan indifferently and sneered. He also rushed into one of the Shura gates. "Maybe you'll regret it when the time comes." Zhuoan chuckled and didn't stay any longer. He headed straight for the last Azura gate. After entering the Shura gate, Zhuoan saw a huge blood-red platform in front of him. The platform was several miles wide. Outside the blood-red platform was a pitch-black void. The blood-red platform was suspended in the void. Only when he looked around did Zhuoan discover that there were a total of 6 blood-red platforms like this in the surroundings. Moreover, there were 3 platforms on each level, while the third level was a relatively narrow platform. There were 3 balls of blood-red light on the platform. Origin energy surged out from the balls of light, causing Zhuoan to feel warm all over. The 3 blood-red balls of light on the third level should be the origin energy of Azura Island. Looking at the blood-red balls of light on the third level, Zhuowen's eyes burned with passion. The blood-red ball uses a 2-on-1 elimination system. The winner will go to the next level. In the end, only 3 people will be able to reach the 3rd level. A majestic voice rang out in the blood-red ball. It was Azura Li Di who had spoken. Whoosh! A blood-red light pillar appeared in front of Zhuowen. Then, a blue-clothed youth was teleported in front of Zhuowen. However, the moment he appeared on the platform, his attention quickly fell on Zhuowen. The confusion in his eyes was instantly replaced by a trace of vigilance. Zhuowen sized up the blue-clothed youth in front of him. He saw that this person was around 23 years old. His hair was tied up into a crown, and he had a tall figure. He had a dignified appearance and was handsome and confident. When his eyes opened and closed, an extremely frightening radiance erupted from them. The blue-clothed youth's aura was quite strong, and his cultivation had reached the peak of the Heavenly Master realm. However, his aura was slightly weaker than Xueluoz's. In terms of battle strength, he should be weaker than Xueluozi. Advanced Heavenly Master? The blue-clothed youth quickly sensed that Zhuowen's aura was only at the advanced Heavenly Master realm. A strange light flashed in his eyes, and his vigilance gradually faded. It seems that I'm quite lucky. The blue-clothed youth slowly walked towards Zhuowen and chuckled. Do we still need to fight? Your cultivation is lower than mine, so your battle strength is definitely inferior to mine. You'd better give up. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, Isn't it better to say this after you defeat me? I don't think it's necessary to say this now. Haha. It seems that you're going to fight with me? Well, I'll let you experience the difference between a peak Heavenly Master and an advanced Heavenly Master. The blue-clothed youth placed his right hand on the hilt of the sword at his waist and clenched his fingers. Then, he stomped his foot on the ground, and a terrifying force gushed out. The blue-clothed youth rushed towards Zhuowen like a bolt of lightning. In an instant, he was in front of Zhuowen. Swoosh! The blue-clothed young man let out a low cry. His right hand suddenly pulled back, and a dazzling cold glow surged out. The long sword at his waist was pulled out by him. Immediately, the blue-clothed young man slashed out horizontally. A blue sword glow rushed out, and like a poisonous snake, it pierced towards Zhuowen's vital points. 7 kills. Zhuowen shouted and took out the 7 kills saber. Then, he twisted his waist and dodged the terrifying sword light by a hair's breadth. At the same time, the 7 kills saber descended and slashed towards the blue-clothed youth's waist. Feeling the 7 kills saber at his waist, the blue-clothed youth's pupils shrank to the size of needles. His right hand suddenly moved horizontally, and the long sword that was stabbing towards Zhuowen's vital points was held horizontally at his waist. Clang! A sharp ear-piercing whistling sound was emitted when the blade and sword came into contact. Soon after, a frightening energy erupted. The two of them were actually in a deadlock in the air. The frightening energy ripples spread out like ripples in water, causing the surrounding space to faintly tremble. Your strength is not bad. The blue-clothed youth frowned slightly. The strength that Zhuowen had unleashed made him shudder with fear. Is it only not bad? Zhuowen said indifferently. Soon after, a terrifying slaughter force erupted from his body. 8 seas of blood surged out of the void and instantly enveloped the blue-clothed young man. The blue-clothed young man immediately felt a rather powerful pressure from the surroundings, causing his body to involuntarily fall downwards. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on him. The slaughter momentum had merged the Shura blood spear momentum and slaughter aura. Its power was much stronger than the Shura blood spear momentum. Even if Zhuowen did not evolve into 4 heads and 8 arms, he could still exert 8 times the power of the slaughter momentum with the 8 blood spears. Slash. With the help of the blood seas, Zhuowen raised his right hand again, and the 7 kills saber slashed down, heavily hitting the long sword at the blue-clothed youth's waist. Clang. A crisp sound rang out. The long sword in the blue-clothed youth's hand was knocked away, and the 7 kills saber continued to sweep towards the blue-clothed youth, intending to cut him in half. No. The blue-clothed young man's pupils constricted to the size of needles. He shouted loudly and hurriedly retreated. Unfortunately, his speed was still slower than Zhuowen's blade. Although his waist and abdomen had avoided the 7 kills blade slash, his right hand that was holding the sword had been directly slashed by the 7 kills blade. Puff! Blood splashed out. The blue-clothed youth screamed and hurriedly retreated, holding his cut-off right hand. His whole body trembled, and he stared at Zhuowen in fear. In just one confrontation, he was defeated, and his arm was cut off by this black-faced youth. Was this guy really a warrior at the late stage of the Heavenly Master realm? Do you still want to fight? Zhuowen walked over slowly, pointing the 7 kills saber at the blue-clothed youth, and said lightly, "What's your name?" The blue-clothed youth suddenly asked. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said lightly, "My name is Long Wen." "Long Wen? Your strength is far beyond that of a warrior at the peak of the Heavenly Master realm. Why have I never heard of you before?" The blue-clothed youth asked unwillingly. "There are countless warriors in the world, and there are many hidden experts that you don't know. Is it strange that you haven't heard of my name?" Zhuowen sneered. The blue-clothed youth took a deep look at Zhuowen and said, "Maybe. I accept my defeat wholeheartedly. Goodbye." With that, the blue-clothed youth activated the Azura talisman and disappeared from the scarlet platform. Chapter 1133. Killing Shueluozi. The scarlet platform on the second level was twice as large as the first level. At this moment, a figure was sitting cross-legged opposite Zhuowen. Perhaps because he had noticed Zhuowen's appearance, the figure slowly got up and turned around, staring at Zhuowen with a pair of scarlet eyes. "Your luck is not bad. You actually met me." This person's voice was rather cold. His eyes stared at Zhuowen as he spoke sinisterly. "I am indeed lucky to have met you, Shueluozi, the young master of the Splattering Blood Gang," Zhuowen replied faintly. Outside the Azura Blood Arena, Azura Lady, Lun Hei, and the Bloody Butcher were quietly floating in the air. The three of them were silently staring at the remaining 3 light screens in the sky. The 3 light screens were showing the last 3 battles at the bottom of the Azura Blood Arena. When the 3 battles ended, the ownership of the 3 island origins would be determined. All the spectators on the countless viewing platforms quietened down. They held their breaths as their eyes continuously focused on the 3 light screens. This was the final battle, and it was also the battle that everyone had their eyes on. No one wanted to miss it. Lun Jiao and Diba are going up against each other. It seems that Lun Jiao is in a bad situation this time. The Bloody Butcher suddenly gloated at Lun Hei. The 3 light screens showed Yama Crown Prince against a black-clothed young man with a sword, Diba against Lun Jiao, and Shueluozi against Zhuowen. Lun Hei's face turned slightly ugly. In fact, he was well aware of Diba's strength. Although Lun Jiao's battle strength was far superior to ordinary warriors, there was still a gap between her and Diba. "Bloody Butcher, are you very proud?" Shueluozi's opponent is also not simple. "He may fail miserably when the time comes," Lun Hei said somewhat angrily. The Bloody Butcher sneered and said, "You don't have to worry about that. He's just a late-stage Heavenly Master. Even if he has some strength, it's unlikely that he's a match for my son. You should be worried about your Lun Jiao, haha." Previously, Lun Hei had been nagging about how Shueluozi's body was destroyed by Zhuowen a month ago, which made Bloody Butcher very unhappy. Now that Lun Jiao had met Diba, he naturally would not let go of this opportunity to ridicule her. Lun Hei snorted coldly and stopped arguing with the Bloody Butcher. His gaze was fixed on the light screen on the platform where Lun Jiao and Diba were. His hands trembled slightly, showing that he was not calm at all. The 3 of them had already been paying attention to Diba, the monster of the excellent Spirit Island, when the Azura Blood Arena began. The fighting strength that the former had displayed had indeed surprised the 3 of them. Azura Lady predicted that Diba might not be as strong as the Yama Crown Prince, but the gap would not be huge. He was even stronger than Lun Jiao and Shueluozi. Lun Hei and the Bloody Butcher didn't doubt Azura Lady's conjecture. After all, Azura Lady was the only mid-level emperor on Azura Island. His foresight was much higher than theirs. "The battle has begun," Azura Lady suddenly said, which immediately attracted Lun Hei and the Bloody Butcher's attention to the light screen in the sky. On the light screen, The Yama Crown Prince and the black-clothed swordsman clashed fiercely. The Yama Crown Prince's weapon was the blood-red claws on the back of his hands. Every time he waved them, they would leave terrifying claw shadows in the air. The black-clothed swordsman wasn't weak either. With a swing of his sword, thousands of sword shadows spread out in all directions like a violent storm. They were evenly matched with the claw shadows. Those who could reach the bottom of the Azura Blood Arena weren't mediocre. Basically, they were all monstrous monsters with fighting strength that far exceeded their realm. Even the Yama Crown Prince had to treat them with caution. On the second light screen, the battle between Lun Jiao and Diba had also begun. Diba's fighting style was wild and unruly. He was bare-handed. Every time he blasted out a blow, it was like a huge mountain crushing down from the sky. It was extremely terrifying. Lun Jiao held two swords in her hands. Her fighting style was extremely elegant and her speed was extremely fast. It was a sharp contrast to Diba's wild and unruly style. However, Diba's strength was obviously stronger than Lun Jiao's. For a moment, Diba seemed to have gained the upper hand in the battle. The third light screen showed Zhuowen and Xue Luozi. However, strangely, very few people were paying attention to their battle. This was because many people could see that Xue Luozi's opponent was only a late Heavenly Master. In their opinion, such a cultivation was simply cannon fodder for Xue Luozi. The result of this battle could be guessed without watching it. Therefore, many people simply chose not to watch it. Even the Bloody Butcher only glanced at it. His main attention was on the first two light screens. His thoughts were similar to the others. He believed that Xue Luozi's victory should be without any suspense. "I'll give you an unforgettable death, here," Xue Luozi sneered. He stretched out his right hand and took out a blood spear. His left hand suddenly pressed against the handle of the blood spear and activated his Yuan force. Suddenly, the blood spear shot out like an arrow from a bow. The moment the blood spear shot out, Xue Luozi's body moved along with the spear. He suddenly stepped out and followed closely behind the blood spear. A whistling sound rang out, fluttering Xue Luozi's messy hair. His imposing manner was as strong as the sun. Zhuowen stood quietly in the same place, calmly staring at the person and the spear that were getting closer and closer. He did not feel the approaching danger at all. It was as if he was scared silly. Pretentious trash, he. Looking at Zhuowen's motionless figure, Xue Luozi's smile became colder. His speed increased a little. In an instant, he was in front of Zhuowen. The tip of the blood spear glowed with a cold light as it pierced toward Zhuowen's chest. Die. When Xue Luozi raised his head slightly, he was surprised to see a strange smile on Zhuowen's face. A bolt of lightning flashed in front of him, and then the blood spear pierced through Zhuowen's chest. However, no blood flowed out. There was only an illusory feeling of penetration. An afterimage? The moment the blood spear pierced through Zhuowen, Xue Luozi realized something. He suddenly grasped the handle of the spear with his right hand. Then, he stomped his foot and twisted his waist, forcibly bending his body. Immediately, he found that Zhuowen had appeared in front of him, holding the 7-kill saber and slashing at him. "This saber. How is it possible? It's you." Looking at the approaching 7-kill saber, Xue Luozi's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He could not help but think of the figure from a month ago. It was that figure who forced him to abandon his physical body and flee. Clang! The 7-kill saber collided with the blood spear, and a metallic sound rang out. Xue Luozi felt a huge force, and with a groan, he was sent flying back dozens of steps. "It's you!" Xue Luozi shouted angrily. His voice was filled with fear. Zhuowen didn't answer. He stamped his foot, and his slaughter momentum gushed out. 8 blood seas surrounded his body. His speed soared to the extreme, and he arrived in front of Xue Luozi in an instant. The 7-kill saber slashed out with an indomitable momentum. "Blood eye. Open." Xue Luozi's eyes turned red, and his heart sank to the extreme. He had experienced the terror of this guy a month ago. At that time, this guy was only at the early stage of the Heavenly Master realm. Now, he was at the late stage of the Heavenly Master realm. Needless to say, his strength was much more terrifying than a month ago. Whoosh! The blood eye between Shueluoz's eyebrows opened, and a terrifying line of blood shot out toward Zhuowen. Demonic eye. Zhuowen immediately opened the demonic eye and swallowed the line of blood. Then, he slashed out with the 7-kill saber again. 8 blood seas wrapped around Shueluozi, and his body suddenly froze. Morning seal. The moment the blood seas wrapped around Shueluozi, Zhuowen immediately pinched the morning seal. A sorrowful aura gushed out and filled the whole space. The sorrowful aura rose in Shueluoz's heart, causing him to feel weak and his strength to decrease by about 20%. After that, Zhuowen's saber momentum remained unchanged and slashed toward Shueluoz's waist. Bastard! Shueluoz's movements became much slower and his strength weakened under the confinement of the blood seas and the morning seal. Looking at the 7-kill saber, Shueluozi clenched his teeth and placed the blood spear in front of his waist to block the saber. Bang! The 7 murders blade was pressed against the surface of the blood spear. Zhuowen coldly smiled. With a twist of his wrist, the 7 murders blade spun and suddenly flicked. The blood spear was immediately sent flying by Zhuowen. At the same time, Zhuowen slashed out with his blade again. This time, the speed of his blade was much faster than before. Puff! Blood spurted out as the 7-kill saber slashed across Shueluoz's waist. Shueluozi groaned as he was cut in half. Blood gushed out from his body, forming a small pool of blood under his feet. Ah! With a shrill scream, Shueluoz's upper body was sent flying while his lower body fell into a pool of blood. Deng! Zhuowen's eyes were indifferent. He took a step forward and rushed towards Shueluoz's upper body. In an instant, he arrived above Shueluoz's head and slashed out with his blade, aiming for Shueluoz's forehead. This time, he wanted to shatter Shueluoz's blood-eye armored soul so that he could not use the secret skill to escape. Activate the Azura talisman, Shueluozi screamed as he felt the 7-kill saber getting closer and closer to his forehead. His eyes were full of fear. He finally activated the Azura talisman. He knew that if he did not activate it now, he would really die here. Waves of space power wrapped around Shueluoz's upper body and tried to pull him out of the scarlet platform. Space power? Shueluozi, you must die today. Feeling the space power around Shueluozi, Zhuowen's eyes changed slightly. He exerted his terrifying mental energy on the 7-kill saber and increased its speed. In an instant, the 7-kill saber had reached Shueluoz's forehead. No. Chapter 1134. Island origin. At this moment, the battle between the first 2 light screens had reached its climax. The intense collisions and the dazzling yuan energy caused many of the spectators to cheer in unison. Looks like the Yama Crown Prince is about to win. The Azura Blood Manners Azura Battle Arts is truly extraordinary. The Bloody Butcher's attention was attracted by the first screen. He couldn't help but mutter to himself. That black-clothed youth is not bad. He's able to withstand Yama Crown Prince's attack for such a long time. However, he has reached his limit now. Lunhei agreed. Azura Lady's lips curled into a smile. Yama Crown Prince was his son. As his father, he naturally felt proud when he was praised. However, I'm afraid that Lun Jiao of your Jianing auction house is about to reach her limit. Hee. Bloody Butcher shifted his gaze to the second light screen. He couldn't help but sneer when he saw Lun Jiao being suppressed by DIBA. Lun Hei's face suddenly turned as black as charcoal. He glared coldly at Bloody Butcher and immediately looked at Lun Jiao in the light screen with a worried expression. In fact, he already knew the outcome of the battle between Lun Jiao and DIBA. He just didn't want to lose face. Whoosh! When everyone's attention was focused on the first 2 light screens, a bloody light suddenly rose from the bottom of the Azura Blood Arena, attracting everyone's attention. Someone used the Azura talisman? Someone has already been eliminated. Azura Lady was stunned and couldn't help but reveal a trace of surprise. He didn't expect that someone would be eliminated so quickly. Yama Crown Prince and the black-clothed youth in the first light screen and Lun Jiao and DIBA in the second light screen were still fighting. No one had been defeated yet. Therefore, only Shueluozi and Zhuowen in the third light screen could be eliminated. My son's speed is pretty fast. He defeated his opponent so quickly. Bloody Butcher laughed with a smug look in his eyes. Like the others, he didn't pay attention to the third light curtain at all. In his opinion, Shweluoz's victory was guaranteed. There was no suspense at all. The moment the Bloody Butcher laughed out loud, the surroundings suddenly fell into a strange silence. Not only were the people in the stands like this, even Azura Lidi and Lun Hei, who were beside the Bloody Butcher, fell into a rare silence. Only the Bloody Butcher's proud laughter was echoing in the arena. The Bloody Butcher also noticed the strange atmosphere around him, and his smile faded a little. He looked at Azura Lidi and Lun Hei in surprise because he noticed that the two of them were staring at the third light screen. Their expressions were extremely shocked, as if they had seen something strange. Plop! The dull sound of a heavy object falling to the ground attracted the Bloody Butcher's attention. When he looked in the direction of the sound, he found that the bloody light slowly converged, revealing the true face of the figure inside. This was a corpse that only had the upper half of its body. It was dressed in a blood-red robe, and there was an extremely wide bloody scar between its eyebrows. Blood flowed out from the bloody scar between its eyebrows. Its eyes were wide open, and it was clear that it had died with a grievance. When the Bloody Butcher's attention fell on the face of the corpse, his body trembled, and he fell into an unconcealable silence. The owner of the corpse was none other than Shweluozi. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Everyone's gaze also fell on Shweluozi's corpse, and they all gasped. In the next moment, everyone's gaze shifted to the Bloody Butcher, who was in the air. After all, Shweluozi was the Bloody Butcher's son. After a long silence, the Bloody Butcher's eyes suddenly turned scarlet, but he did not say anything. He stomped his foot and came to Shweluozi's side under everyone's gaze. He touched Shweluozi's neck with his right hand, and then he sighed softly. He quietly put away Shweluozi's corpse and returned to Azura Lidi and Lun Hei's side. However, the Bloody Butcher's eyes were fixated on the third light screen. He was staring at the tall and straight figure with a strong killing intent. How dare this young man kill his own Shweluozi? He, the Bloody Butcher, would never let him off. After the Bloody Butcher calmly put away Shweluozi's corpse, countless people shifted their attention to Zhuoan on the third light screen. The uproar was like a monstrous tsunami, whistling through the entire area. Originally, everyone thought that the battle on the third light screen would be a foregone conclusion. They also believed that Shweluozi would definitely win. But now, Shweluozi's death ignited the atmosphere in the Azura Blood Arena. Everyone's attention shifted from the first and second light screens to Zhuoan on the third light screen. Cheers, roars, and countless whispers began to sweep through the entire Azura Blood Arena. Everyone went crazy. Zhuoan, who was only a late-stage heavenly master, had defeated Shweluozi, whose cultivation was one level higher than his, in the shortest time among the three light screens. For many people, this result could be considered as a rather big miracle. What's the origin of this man? How can a late-stage heavenly master defeat Shweluozi? Azura Lidi looked at the proud figure on the third light screen in amazement. Lun Hei shook his head and said, "This man's face is unfamiliar. He shouldn't be a genius of our Azura island. I'm afraid that he's a genius from another island, like Diba. Oh. Are the 3 spots for this year's island source going to be occupied by 2 geniuses from other islands?" Azura Lidi muttered with a frown. Lun Hei smiled bitterly. He was afraid that Azura Lidi was right. 2 of the 3 spots for this year's Azura island source would be occupied by geniuses from other islands. He was somewhat helpless about this. The Bloody Butcher stared coldly at Zhuoan. He didn't say anything, or rather, he wasn't in the mood to speak. The death of his 2 celestial guardians a month ago had already dealt a heavy blow to his bloody splashing gang. Now, his personal disciple, Shweluozi, a genius who had the potential to advance to the Emperor realm, had died in front of him. One could imagine how bad his mood was at the moment. Countless onlookers were constantly discussing the identity and origin of Zhuoan. Obviously, in everyone's opinion, since he had the strength to kill Shweluozi at such a young age, he couldn't be a nobody in the bitter sea. However, what made many people smile bitterly was that no matter how they thought about it, they could not figure it out. None of the famous geniuses in Misery Sea seemed to fit Shuo Wen's appearance and temperament. Clang. After eliminating Shui Luozi, a chain staircase appeared on the platform of the third layer. Zhuowen lifted his foot and walked up step by step, a fiery light flashing in his eyes. I heard Shawshank say that the blood crystal source erupts with the island's source. I wonder if the third layer has it, Zhuowen whispered as he walked. Boom. The moment Zhuowen stepped onto the third layer, Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he discovered that there was a spatial force around him. Immediately, he felt a wave of dizziness as he arrived at a blood-red space several miles wide. What surprised Zhuowen was that there were countless blood-red light spots floating in the air. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes as he discovered that these blood-red light spots were actually blood-red crystals. Those are blood crystals? Zhuowen raised his eyebrows as a hint of joy flashed in his eyes. Since there were blood crystals, it was very likely that the blood crystal source was here. Zhuowen shifted his gaze from the blood-red light spots in the air to the platform in the center of the space. There were 3 palm-sized blood-red light clusters on the platform. It seems that the third layer should be a sealed space. What you saw on the second layer was only the surface. The moment you stepped onto the third layer, you broke into the space constructed by the third layer. Xiao Hei's voice slowly resounded in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen nodded and took a step forward, arriving in front of the platform. The 3 light clusters were irregular in shape and emitted a rich source energy, causing Zhuowen's eyes to shine brightly. As his eyes flickered, Zhuowen's right hand reached into the light cluster in the center. The light cluster did not resist Zhuowen's grasp and was directly absorbed by him. The moment his right hand came into contact with the ball of light, Zhuowen could clearly sense strands of origin energy enter his sea of consciousness. It actually expanded his sea of consciousness and even tempered his meridians. No wonder everyone says that the island's source energy has the effect of increasing one's aptitude. Not only can this thing expand the sea of consciousness, it can even temper the meridians. Under the constant tempering of this source energy, it would be strange if one's aptitude did not increase. Feeling the benefits of the island's source energy, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with joy. However, although the light cluster was only the size of a palm, the density of the source energy it contained was extremely high. Zhuowen estimated that it would take quite some time to absorb all of it. Furthermore, this thing was also a token for the Sky Capital Peak's disciple assessment. Hence, Zhuowen naturally would not absorb all of it. He would definitely leave a portion behind. I wonder if I'll be able to take down the other 2 origin energies. Putting away his island's source energy, Zhuowen's eyes were fiery as he looked at the remaining 2 light clusters. His right hand suddenly reached out towards the light cluster on the right, wanting to take it into his palm. Bang! When Zhuowen's right hand was about to touch the light cluster, a terrifying blood-colored energy erupted, repelling Zhuowen's right hand. Under this energy, Zhuowen was forced to take several steps back, his brows slightly furrowed. It seems like each person can only take 1 island's source energy. I was too greedy, like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Zhuowen knew that this energy should be the energy of Azura Island's island spirit. It would not allow one person to obtain too much source energy. Whoosh. Chapter 1135. Origin of Blood Crystals. Zhuowen slowly turned around when he heard the sound of something breaking through the air behind him. He immediately saw the Yama Crown Prince and Diba appear in this space. The Yama Crown Prince and Diba looked at each other as a sharp light burst out from their eyes. However, this only lasted for a moment before the 2 of them shifted their gazes away and focused their attention on the platform in front of them. When they saw that there was another figure standing on the platform, the 2 of them frowned slightly. There was actually someone who had arrived here before the 2 of them. This was truly unexpected. The Yama Crown Prince raised his eyebrows as he looked at Zhuowen, whose face was as black as charcoal, and said in surprise, "It's actually not Shui Luozi?" A trace of surprise flashed across Diba's eyes. He had naturally seen this black-faced youth before. Among the 12 people who had reached the bottom of the Azura Blood Arena, this person had the lowest cultivation and was also the only advanced heavenly venerate. Originally, Diba thought that this fellow would be eliminated in the first round. He did not expect that this fellow would actually come all the way here and obtain the island's origin before the two of them. However, the surprise in their eyes only lasted for a moment before their attention was attracted by the remaining two blood-colored balls of light on the platform. Azura Island's origin? Diba and the Yama Crown Prince muttered in a low voice as they rushed forward at the same time. They tacitly took the remaining two balls of origin on the platform, one on the left and one on the right. Their eyes were filled with a blazing light. Zhuoan merely glanced at the two of them before his gaze landed on the countless blood-colored light spots in the sky. There were so many blood crystals that at a glance, they were like countless stars in the night sky. Such a huge amount of blood crystals. Looking at the huge amount of blood crystals in the sky, Zhuoan's eyes revealed a trace of excitement. These blood crystals contained extremely dense demonic massacre chi, which was extremely useful for his massacre devil Dao. Moreover, Zhuoan guessed that the origin of the blood crystals was hidden in the depths of these blood crystals, which was the thousand-layered stone. Swoosh! While Zhuoan was pondering about the origin of the blood crystals, the Yama Crown Prince, who had kept the island's origin, took a step forward and rushed towards the blood-colored light spots in the sky. Haha! With so many blood crystals, it was not a waste for me to enter this strange space tens of thousands of meters underground. The moment the Yama Crown Prince rushed out, his wild and arrogant laughter resounded over this place. It appeared extremely powerful. Diba was taken aback. However, he did not hesitate and followed behind Lin Fan. Blood crystals were extremely valuable. There was no reason for him not to take them now that he had stumbled upon them. Let's go up and take a look first. Shaking his head, Zhuoan took a step forward and also rushed towards the countless blood-colored light spots in the sky. With a suction force from his right hand, he was able to pinch a handful of blood crystals. Zhuoan unceremoniously stuffed them into his spirit ring. Diba, Yama Crown Prince, and Zhuoan formed a silent tacit understanding. They didn't say a word and separated themselves from each other, focusing on collecting the blood crystals. About an hour later, Zhuoan realized that 1/3 of the space in his spirit ring was filled with blood crystals. The number of blood crystals in his spirit ring had already reached hundreds of thousands. However, the surrounding blood crystals were still endless. It seemed as if they would never be able to finish collecting them. Too many blood crystals weren't of much use to Zhuoan. Right now, he only wanted to find the origin of the blood crystals as soon as possible. Looking at Diba and the Yama Crown Prince, who were still busy collecting the blood crystals, Zhuoan shook his head and began to observe his surroundings. He was shocked to realize that other than the blood crystals that were constantly being swept out, there was only darkness around him. Xiaohei, can you sense where the source of these blood crystals is? These blood crystals shouldn't have appeared here for no reason. Xiaohei's sensing ability was much stronger than his. Therefore, when faced with such a question, Zhuoan naturally asked it. Xiaohei was silent for a moment. Then, it said to Zhuoan, "Walk to the center of these blood crystals. There is a black hole about 10 feet in size above that area. The blood crystals are gushing out from there. You can go in there and look for them." Hearing this, Zhuoan nodded. Then, he looked at Diba and the Yama Crown Prince. He realized that the two of them were still busy collecting the blood crystals. Zhuoan slowly walked towards the center of the blood crystals. Diba and the Yama Crown Prince also noticed Zhuoan's actions. After a few glances, they no longer paid attention to him. As Zhuoan wasn't moving in their direction, the two of them didn't pay much attention to him. When he reached the center, Zhuoan raised his head slightly. Indeed, he found an extremely black hole above. This hole was exactly the same color as the void. If it wasn't for Xiaohei's reminder, Zhuoan might not have been able to find such a hole even if he stayed here for a few years. Zhuoan glanced at Diba and the Yama Crown Prince again. When he realized that the two of them weren't paying attention to him at all, he took a step forward and silently entered the hole. The passage of this hole was vertically extended. Moreover, in the passage, a few blood crystals would erupt from time to time. This made Zhuoan even more certain that there might really be a source of blood crystals above. Zhuoan was like a swimming fish as he swam towards the top. His speed was extremely fast, and it didn't take long for him to reach the top. When he stepped onto the ground, he was shocked to see a huge blood crystal lode in front of him. So the blood crystal lode is hidden here. Looking at the huge lode in front of him, Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He took a step forward and arrived in front of the lode. To be able to nurture a blood crystal lode, there must be a source of blood crystals inside. Kid, release the demonic eye. This thing is extremely sensitive to killing aura, Xiao Hei suddenly said. Zhuowen nodded. A slit appeared between his eyebrows, and the demonic eye, which was surging with demonic aura, shot out. The pitch-black pupil scanned the surroundings before it shot out in a certain direction. Follow him. As soon as Xiao Hei finished speaking, Zhuowen followed closely behind. After a while, the demonic eye stopped above a lode that was filled with blood crystals. Looks like it should be below. Zhuowen muttered softly as he pulled out the 7-kill saber in his right hand. Killing aura gushed out as he slashed down. Instantly, the blood crystals above the lode were shattered. Boom! Boom! After a dozen slashes, the blood crystals above the lode were finally shattered, revealing a dark hole. Boom! As soon as the hole was formed, a strange and mysterious aura burst out from it. Zhuowen was caught off guard as he took a few steps back. He furrowed his brows as he stared at the hole that he had created. Swoosh! Just as Zhuowen was hesitating whether he should go forward to check it out, a bloody light burst out and fled upwards. Oh! Could that be the source of blood crystals? Where are you going? Zhuowen was initially startled when he saw the blood glow that had suddenly rushed out. Soon after, he took a step forward and intercepted the blood glow. With a stroke of his right hand, he caught it in his palm. Boom! A terrifying murderous aura surged out of Zhuowen's palm. Zhuowen's expression changed, and a golden light shot out from his right hand. The Buddhist energy firmly suppressed the murderous aura. What a terrifying killing aura! Zhuowen's brows knit together slightly, and only then did he open his palm. An extremely irregular-shaped rock lay silently on his palm, and it was around the size of half a palm. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, Zhuowen realized that the lode he was in began to shake violently. Pieces of gravel fell from above and almost hit Zhuowen's head. Kid! What are you waiting for? Since you have taken away the source of blood crystals, this lode is useless. It will collapse soon. Are you planning to die here? Xiao Hei's exasperated voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen finally reacted as he quickly returned to his senses. Boom! 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 The violent tremors immediately attracted the attention of Diba and the Yama Crown Prince, who were collecting blood crystals not far away. What happened? The two of them raised their heads at the same time as their gazes converged on the center of the tremors. Their eyes flickered as they flew towards the center of the blood crystals. This was the center of the tremors. Just as the two of them approached the center of the blood crystals, Zhuowen's miserable figure suddenly burst out of the cave. Behind him, countless pieces of gravel fell and sealed the cave. The terrifying aftershock of the falling pieces of gravel spread out, causing the Yama Crown Prince and Diba's expressions to change as they quickly retreated dozens of steps. There's actually a cave here. Looking at the sealed cave, the Yama Crown Prince's expression turned ugly. He finally remembered the reason for Zhuowen's strange actions. It turned out that he wanted to enter the hidden cave. Diba's expression was similar to the Yama Crown Prince's. Shortly after, the two of them simultaneously turned their gazes towards Zhuowen and coldly asked, "What did you obtain inside?" At this moment, the excitement on Zhuowen's face slowly receded. When he entered the tunnel, he had already placed the source of blood crystals into his spiritual ring. Hence, Diba and the Yama Crown Prince did not know what benefits Zhuowen had obtained inside. Zhuowen indifferently stared at Diba and the Yama Crown Prince, whose expressions were becoming increasingly unfriendly, and said, "What does what I obtained have to do with you?" The Yama Crown Prince narrowed his eyes as his voice gradually became gloomy. He said, "There is a blood crystal mine tens of thousands of feet below the ground. It is said that the mine can nurture the source of blood crystals. Once the source of blood crystals is taken away, the mine will collapse. And these characteristics are quite similar to the collapsed cave. Did you obtain the source of blood crystals inside? As the Yama Crown Prince spoke until here, a terrifying aura burst out from his body. He was certain that Zhuoan had obtained the source of blood crystals inside. One had to know that there was only one source of blood crystals in a blood crystal mine. There was only one blood crystal mine under the Azura blood ground. If the source of blood crystals was taken away, the blood crystal mine would be useless. Naturally, the Yama Crown Prince was extremely furious. Chapter 1136. Azura War Halberjuan narrowed his eyes. It seemed like the Yama Crown Prince was quite familiar with the blood crystal vein. He had guessed that Zhuoan had obtained the source of the blood crystal from this point alone. I say, am I right? The Yama Crown Prince stomped his foot and an even more terrifying aura burst out. He stared coldly at Zhuoan. I don't know what the source of the blood crystal you are talking about is. Zhuoan quietly stood up and said indifferently, Fine. It's fine if you don't admit it. I will make you hand over the source of the blood crystal. The Yama Crown Prince laughed coldly. Without any explanation, he rushed out and appeared in front of Zhuoan in an instant. A pair of blood-red claws appeared on the back of his hands. Then, with a tricky angle, he rushed towards Zhuoan's vital points, intending to kill him. Zhuoan's gaze turned cold. This Yama Crown Prince was clearly intending to kill him with this move. As he thought of this, Zhuoan waved his right hand, and instantly, the Seven Slaughters' saber appeared in his palm. The aura of slaughter slammed down, causing the surrounding air to stagnate. Clang! The angle of Zhuoan's attack was quite tricky and it accurately blocked the Yama Crown Prince's claws. However, Zhuoan frowned because the Yama Crown Prince's strength was so great that it caused his right hand to stiffen. Break! The Yama Crown Prince roared and increased the strength of his claws. Immediately, Zhuoan frowned and retreated. He looked at the Yama Crown Prince cautiously. The Yama Crown Prince was the strongest demon in the Azura Blood Palace. It was said that he had the strength of a first-grade emperor. The strength he had displayed was indeed extraordinary. Die! The Yama Crown Prince stomped his foot and dashed forward again. His speed soared to the extreme and he intended to take advantage of the situation and crush Zhuoan to death. Zhuoan no longer held back and directly displayed the second-grade bedevilment. A terrifying murderous demonic aura burst out and dyed the surrounding dozens of feet blood-red. It looked extremely frightening. Bang bang bang! In an instant, Zhuoan and the Yama Crown Prince clashed. A frightening battle roar resounded. The energy shockwaves formed by the battle permeated the surroundings, causing ripples to form. This fellow is actually on par with the Yama Crown Prince. Diba, who was not far away, revealed a trace of surprise when he saw this scene. At this moment, outside the Azura Blood Arena, Azura Lidi's face was extremely gloomy. He knew that there was a blood crystal mineral vein below. Now that the source of the blood crystals had been taken away by Zhuoan, it was equivalent to the entire mineral vein being wasted. Azura Lidi's mood was extremely bad. This brat is too daring. He actually dared to take away the source of the blood crystal. He must be tired of living. The bloody butcher sneered. But he's not simple either. He's actually on par with the Yama Crown Prince. No wonder he was able to kill Xue Luozi, Lun He said with a frown. Old Lun He, aren't you talking too much? The bloody butcher looked at Lun He with a gloomy face and said coldly. Lun He chuckled when he saw the gloomy expression on the bloody butcher's face. However, such an expression made the bloody butcher fly into a rage. He almost rushed forward to fight Lun He. Xue Luozi's death was a pain in his heart. How could the bloody butcher not be angry when Lun He kept talking about Xue Luozi? The Yama Crown Prince is more powerful than this. Otherwise, he wouldn't be comparable to a first-level emperor, Azura Lidi said with a smile. The bloody butcher and Lun He both nodded. The Yama Crown Prince had yet to use the famous Azura battle art of the Azura Blood Palace. That cultivation art had the terrifying effect of increasing one's combat strength. Bang! A dull sound rang out. Zhuoan and the Yama Crown Prince each took a few steps back. They stared at each other with a dignified expression, especially Zhuowen. He had used the second level of bedevilment, but he still couldn't suppress the Yama Crown Prince. The latter was indeed terrifying. You're indeed extraordinary to be able to reach this place. However, this is the end. I'll show you the power of the Azura battle art of the Azura Blood Palace. The Yama Crown Prince muttered in a low voice. Soon after, his 10 fingers gently moved as waves of terrifying blood chi erupted. Soon after, an extremely huge blood shadow formed behind him. This blood shadow had an extremely ugly face and both of its hands were holding a strange blood-colored halberd. The crimson shadow wrapped around the Yama Crown Prince's body. It was as if the Yama Crown Prince was possessed by a valiant Azura. The latter's aura was much stronger than before. It was almost comparable to a first-level Great Emperor. Bang! The Yama Crown Prince stomped on the ground. His speed soared to the extreme, leaving after images in the air. A terrifying aura spread out, as if there was a huge mountain pressing down on him. It was extremely dignified. Clang! Zhuowen, who was at the second level of bedevilment, slashed out with the 7 slaughter blade in his right hand. It blasted against the blood-colored weapon. Sparks flew and Zhuowen groaned as he was sent flying. So strong. With a twist of his waist, Zhuowen somersaulted in the air and stopped. He stared at the Yama Crown Prince in front of him with a solemn expression. Now, you know the disparity between us. The Yama Crown Prince let out a long laugh. He stomped his right foot in the air and shot out like an arrow. In an instant, he was in front of Zhuowen. He raised the blood-red halberd above his head and smashed it down. Zhuowen frowned. 3 pairs of lightning wings grew out from his back. He stepped in the air and dodged the attack. Then, he waved his sleeve and released the ultimate sword array. Sword fire profound. Bang! Monstrous flames spread out. Hundreds of fire swords flew out and wrapped around the Yama Crown Prince. The terrifying fire profound gushed out, catching the Yama Crown Prince off guard. A 6th grade origin array and 6th grade mental energy. This kid is a 6th grade arcana master. Being in the sea of fire, the Yama Crown Prince's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. At the same time, his figure flashed and blocked the fire swords that were flying towards him. They did not threaten him. Kill! Zhuowen roared in anger. He directly dived into the sea of fire and instantly appeared behind the Yama Crown Prince. He slashed out with the 7 slaughter blade and a terrifying killing intent gushed out. This guy, the Yama Crown Prince roared in anger. He placed the halberd behind his back. Then, Zhuowen's attack missed and he hid in the flames again. At the same time, hundreds of fire swords were constantly harassing the Yama Crown Prince. Ding ding ding! In the sword fire, Zhuowen was like a ghost, constantly shuttling back and forth. He mysteriously appeared behind the Yama Crown Prince and launched a sneak attack. However, what made Zhuowen frown was that the Yama Crown Prince was too vigilant. He was able to block his sneak attack every time. Coward, could it be that you can only hide in the dark and launch sneak attacks? The Yama Crown Prince shouted coldly. His vigorous voice resounded in the entire space. However, the Yama Crown Prince was silent. At this moment, Zhuowen, who was in the sword fire, frowned. The Yama Crown Prince was indeed strong. The sword fire could not do anything to him. Looks like I have to add another fire to the sword fire profound. Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. Immediately, a flame with a terrifying temperature burst out from his body. It was the 8 types of earth fire that Zhuowen had collected. Master Lan Miao once said that the sword fire profound could be strengthened by the earth fire. Now, Zhuowen wanted to try the earth fire to strengthen the sword fire profound. Go! As soon as the 8 types of earth fires appeared, they rushed out under Zhuowen's control and merged into the 10 core sword-shaped spiritual treasures of the ultimate sword formation. Boom! Boom! The moment the 8 types of earth fire fused with the core sword formation, the temperature of the surrounding sword fire actually soared at a terrifying speed. At the same time, the sword fire revealed 8 different colors, and its power was actually more than 8 times stronger than before. Whoosh! Whoosh! Numerous sword flames shot out, piercing towards the Yama Crown Prince. Even the latter's eyelids couldn't help but twitch when he felt the scorching temperature. Its power has increased. The Yama Crown Prince brandished his great halberd, blocking the countless flames around him. He discovered that the resistance he faced was even more terrifying than before. For a moment, the pressure on him increased by a lot, causing him to be somewhat flustered. Whoosh! Just as the Yama Crown Prince parried the sword fire around him, Zhuowen suddenly appeared beside him. The 7 kills saber slashed out at a tricky angle. Zhuowen's timing was too precise. Even the Yama Crown Prince's face changed when faced with this saber. Poochie! The 7 kills saber slashed across the waist of the Yama Crown Prince, but the latter's reaction was beyond Zhuowen's expectations. He twisted his body and avoided a fatal wound, but Zhuowen's saber still left a large cut on his waist. You're courting death. The Yama Crown Prince's eyes were red. He swung his great halberd and blasted it towards Zhuowen. However, the latter was very slippery and slipped into the sword fire again. At the same time, he controlled the surrounding sword fire to continue harassing the Yama Crown Prince, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Whoosh! 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 Zhuowen was very patient. The moment the Yama Crown Prince revealed a flaw, he rushed out again. The 7 kills saber left a terrifying wound on the Yama Crown Prince's chest. Blood almost dyed the Yama Crown Prince's clothes red. Bastard, I'll make you pay with your blood. Looking at his miserable state, the Yama Crown Prince roared. He formed a seal with both hands and blasted it on the bloody great halberd in his hand. Azura halberd. Unseal it. The Yama Crown Prince roared. The bloody color on the surface of the great halberd in his hand became even more intense. Then, a terrifying Emperor's aura burst out from the great halberd. This aura was like a storm, filling the entire space. Emperor's aura? The great halberd in the Yama Crown Prince's hand is an Emperor weapon? Diba slowly took a few steps back. He looked at the Emperor's aura that spread out from the sword fire in surprise. Break! The Yama Crown Prince roared. He waved the Azura halberd, and the Emperor's aura spread out. Blood chi spurted out, covering the sword fire in the surroundings. Yama was forced to unseal the Azura halberd. Outside the arena, Shura Li Di narrowed his eyes and murmured in a low voice. There was a hint of surprise in his voice. Bloody Butcher and Lun Hei looked at each other and smiled bitterly. The Azura blood mana was indeed very rich. Even the Yama Crown Prince, a heavenly master, was given an Emperor weapon. How extravagant! Chapter 1137. Azura World exterminating / looking at the Yama Crown Prince holding the Azura War halberd, Diba's face twitched. This Yama Crown Prince really hid his strength well. Even though he hadn't reached the Emperor realm, he actually obtained an Emperor weapon. Azura Li Di was really generous. This brat is Finnish. Diba looked at Zhuowen with a hint of pity in his eyes when he thought of this. The Yama Crown Prince had the combat strength of a First Heaven Emperor. Now that he had an Emperor weapon, the power that he could unleash was beyond imagination. The black-faced young man in front of him was strong and possessed a 6th-grade spiritual strength. It would be difficult for him to resist the Yama Crown Prince who had the Azura battle halberd. Azura War Chi, collapse. The Yama Crown Prince let out a low roar and stomped his foot. Waves of blood-colored ripples spread out from him, forming a blood-colored vortex. The Yama Crown Prince's robes fluttered in the wind, making them flutter loudly. Boom! Boom! As soon as the Azura battle chi rose, the raging sword fire in the surroundings was disturbed by this terrifying battle chi. The sword fire that was originally under Zhuowen's control was directly blocked dozens of meters away by this battle chi, unable to approach the Yama Crown Prince at all. Zhuowen frowned when he saw this. The Azura War Chi was so terrifying that even he felt his heart tremble. I can't let him break the swordfire ultimacy, as Zhuowen muttered to himself. Waves of mental energy gushed out from between his eyebrows. All of the mental energy derived from the 10,000 expansion scripture gushed out at once. In an instant, the power of the swordfire mystery increased by several times. Berserk flames and scorching heat once again pressed against the Yama Crown Prince within the Azura battle chi. My mental energy is still increasing. The Yama Crown Prince frowned. He also felt the swordfire ultimacy that had suddenly increased. So what if it has increased? You still have to break it. Yama Crown Prince coldly snorted as he brandished his Azura war halberd in the air. Terrifying Azura battle chi gushed out like a violent storm, blocking the swordfire. At the same time, Yama Crown Prince stabbed out with his halberd, creating a hole in the swordfire. Following this hole, the Yama Crown Prince suddenly rushed out and actually escaped the range of the swordfire, directly charging towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen's face was extremely solemn, the 7 slaughter blade swung out, and the momentum of slaughter poured into his body. The blade slashed out, colliding with the Azura war halberd. Ding! The saber and the halberd collided in an instant. Then, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. With a muffled groan, he was forced back dozens of steps. His face was slightly pale, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His right hand that was holding the saber was trembling and numb. With the Azura war halberd as an emperor weapon, the Yama Crown Prince's combat strength had increased by many times. Even Zhuowen felt an immense pressure. "You're too weak," the Yama Crown Prince sneered. Taking a step forward, he transformed into an illusory blood shadow and appeared in front of Zhuowen again. Raising the Azura war halberd above his head, he smashed it down. The terrifying Azura war chi formed a powerful blood-red vortex. Dragon domain! With a cold shout, the shadows of dragons revolved around Zhuowen, forming a dragon domain that danced wildly. Boom! The Azura war halberd collided with the dragon domain, and an ear-piercing explosion erupted. Then, the dragon domain trembled violently, but it didn't shatter. It held on for a while. Life destruction. Looking at the dragon domain that blocked the Azura war halberd, the Yama Crown Prince couldn't help but be stunned. Then, an indifferent voice drifted out from the dragon domain. Next, Zhuowen's feet kicked off, and 3 pairs of lightning wings sprouted out from his back. Like a ghost, he circled behind the Yama Crown Prince. Then, Zhuowen's 7 slaughter saber slowly slashed out. It seemed slow, but it was actually fast. This saber brought with it endless murderous aura, and an endless bloody scene emerged. The life destruction was to break the precepts and kill all living things, and destroy all obstacles. When the saber slashed on the Azura war halberd, the sound of metal clashing resounded. Then, the Yama Crown Prince was shocked to find that Zhuowen's saber was extremely powerful. His hands, which were holding the Azura war halberd, felt a little numb. Dang! Dang! The Yama Crown Prince retreated dozens of steps, and his eyes became a little serious. The Yama Crown Prince could naturally see that the 7 slaughter saber in Zhuowen's hand was only a royal spiritual treasure. However, it was unbelievable that he could use a royal spiritual treasure to force him to retreat. This guy's saber technique is not simple. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees the game clearer than the onlooker. Diba, who was standing not far away, could tell at a glance that Zhuowen's annihilation was different from the others. This saber technique, coupled with a royal spiritual treasure, was actually able to force back an emperor weapon. Looks like there's still a huge gap between an emperor-grade spiritual treasure and an emperor-grade weapon. Even after using the destruction of life, he only managed to force the Yama Crown Prince to retreat. Zhuowen frowned slightly. Damn you. The Yama Crown Prince's eyes were red. He had an emperor weapon, but he could not take down Zhuowen. This made the arrogant Yama Crown Prince feel humiliated. "I'm not going to play with you anymore. I'll kill you with a single move." After saying that, the Yama Crown Prince stomped his feet and leaped into the air. His body danced in a strange posture. The Azura battle halberd danced along with his body, and a terrifying pressure bore down on Lin Fan. Azura world exterminating slash. When the Azura war halberd danced in the air, the Yama Crown Prince fell from the sky. His waist bent backward, and the Azura war halberd was raised high. He lowered his knees and fell like 1,000 pounds falling. In an instant, he was above Zhuowen, and the Azura war halberd was smashed down with both hands. Waves of Azura war chi exploded, and Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. The Yama Crown Prince was going to use his strongest move. The Azura world exterminating slash gave him a sense of crisis. Looks like I can only use this thing. Zhuowen sighed softly. He flipped his right hand, and a black round stone appeared. This black round stone was the immortal stone that Zhuowen had bought from the auction house. This thing could fuse spiritual energy and origin energy, and give birth to an extremely powerful and terrifying immortal energy. I hope the immortal energy won't disappoint me. His eyes flickered, and Zhuowen's Niwen palace moved. Spiritual energy gushed out and drilled into the immortal stone. At the same time, origin energy gushed out from Zhuowen's right hand. The two different energies gathered in the immortal stone. Suddenly, the ordinary immortal stone emitted a blazing light. Then, a milky white energy spread out and flowed into Zhuowen's right palm. A feeling that made Zhuowen's heart tremble filled Zhuowen's heart. Is this immortal energy? It's so powerful. Feeling the terror of the milky white energy in his palm, Zhuowen's heart began to tremble, and his heartbeat quickened. Whoosh! When the Yama Crown Prince was about to smash down with the Azura world exterminating slash, Zhuowen reacted. He grasped the seven slaughter saber with his right hand, and the milky white immortal energy wrapped around the seven slaughter saber. Life exterminating slash. The moment the immortal energy was activated, Zhuowen slashed out again. This time, the power of the life exterminating slash was much more terrifying than before. After all, this was a life exterminating slash that was activated with immortal energy. Its power was much more terrifying. Boom! The Azura world exterminating slash and the life exterminating slash collided violently. Then, a terrifying thunderous roar rang out, and a terrifying explosion resounded in the entire space. The energy ripples that spread out were like waves, causing the surrounding air to stagnate. Then, the light of the explosion became more and more terrifying, and the area that it spread out became more and more powerful. Diba, who was watching the battle from a distance, was shocked. He groaned and retreated. Even he felt powerless from the aftermath of the explosion, and his heart trembled slightly. I have to leave this place quickly. The aftermath of the collision between the two of them is too terrifying. Diba's eyes flickered. Without hesitation, he activated the Azura talisman and left this space. The aftermath of the collision between the Emperor weapon and the immortal energy was too terrifying. Diba knew that if he continued to stay here, he would be in grave danger. Outside the Azura blood arena, Azura Lady frowned. At this moment, the light screen in the sky was covered by the light of the explosion. It was so dazzling and terrifying. Bang! With a muffled sound, the light screen above the Azura blood arena became blurry. Then, it shattered. Obviously, the collision was too intense. The aftermath of the collision had shattered the light screen. What will the result of the collision between the Yama Crown Prince and the young man be? Lun He frowned. The shattering of the light screen made him frown. Is there a need to say? It must be the Yama Crown Prince. The bloody butcher sneered. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He couldn't wait for Zhuowen to be killed by the Yama Crown Prince. The Yama Crown Prince has used the Azura world exterminating slash. He should be able to win this battle. Azura Lady nodded. The astonishment in his eyes had returned to normal. He had great confidence in the Yama Crown Prince. Countless martial artists in the stands around the Azura blood arena were also looking forward to the result of this battle. They also wanted to know who would win. Swoosh! A bloody light flashed out from the Azura blood arena, revealing Diba's figure. However, the crowd only took a glance at Diba and no longer paid attention to him. Their attention was on Zhuowen and the Yama Crown Prince. Although the light screen had shattered, the crowd was still intensely discussing the result of the battle. After waiting for about 15 minutes, another blood-red light soared into the sky. Soon after, the originally noisy Azura blood arena immediately quietened down. Countless gazes gathered on the blood-red light that soared into the sky, revealing looks of anticipation. Looks like the result of the battle will be out soon. I wonder who will come out. It should be the black-robed young man. After all, the Yama Crown Prince has an emperor weapon like the Azura war halberd. Although the young man has many trump cards, he shouldn't be a match for the Yama Crown Prince. Azura Lidi, Lun He, and Xue Tu Fu all focused their attention on the blood-red light that soared into the sky. Although they were 100% sure about the result, they still wanted to see if it was what they had expected. Chapter 1138. Fourth level of the bedevilment realm. The figure was holding a blood-red halberd. His face was as pale as snow and blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. His chest heaved violently as he panted heavily. He was like an old bull pulling a cart. He was extremely heavy as he knelt on the ground with one knee. This person was none other than the genius of the Azura Blood Hall, the Yama Crown Prince. When the Yama Crown Prince appeared before everyone's eyes, the atmosphere became silent. However, after a short moment of silence, a deafening uproar broke out. The Yama Crown Prince, who was holding an emperor weapon, the Azura halberd, and possessed the fighting strength of a first-level emperor, had actually been defeated by the black-faced youth. There was only one feeling in everyone's heart, and that was disbelief. The Yama Crown Prince actually lost. Lun He and the Bloody Butcher looked at each other, revealing a trace of disbelief. Diba, who had used the Azura talisman in advance, couldn't help but narrow his eyes as he stared blankly at the miserable Yama Crown Prince. Even he was a little surprised that the one who had been forced out of the strange space was the Yama Crown Prince. Swoosh! With a whistling sound, Azura standing Azura arrived beside the Yama Crown Prince in an instant. His right hand pressed against the latter's back and a vigorous yuan power flowed into the latter's body, causing the latter to slowly recover from his weak state. "Thank you, father." The Yama Crown Prince lowered his head and said softly, "You lost." Azura standing Azura nodded and asked faintly. The Yama Crown Prince's eyes flickered as he sighed and said, "I lost, but that guy isn't any better. A loss is a loss. There's no need to hide it." Azura standing Azura said coldly. The Yama Crown Prince's heart trembled as he quickly replied, "Father is right. However, what should we do about that guy? He took the blood crystal source from the blood crystal vein." Azura standing Azura's eyes were indifferent as he said, "I will deal with this matter. Let's wait for that kid to come out first." After saying that, Azura standing Azura flicked his sleeves and silently stared at the spiral-shaped building in the Azura Blood Arena. He was actually planning to wait for Zhuoan to come out. The gazes of the other martialists in the Azura Blood Arena were also focused on the building. They were also filled with anticipation as they waited for Zhuoan to appear. In the blood-red space, Zhuoan held his chest and coughed a few times. His face was slightly pale, and he muttered in a low voice, "That Yama Crown Prince is indeed extraordinary. Even though I forcefully fused my spiritual energy and elemental energy to create immortal energy, I still ended up with such heavy injuries." Xiao He appeared on Zhuoan's shoulder and spoke in a somewhat disdainful tone, "Kid, you should be content with what you have. Just by looking at the immortal energy, you were able to use a royal rank spiritual treasure to forcefully resist the Emperor weapon, Azura battle halberd of the Yama Crown Prince. In the end, you were able to force the Yama Crown Prince out of this space with a crushing force. There's no need for me to explain how terrifying your immortal energy is, right?" Zhuoan scratched his head because Xiao He was right. The strength of his celestial force had slightly exceeded his expectations. When he utilized his celestial force to activate a monarch rank spirit treasure, the strength he was able to exert was actually comparable to an emperor weapon, and it truly caused Zhuoan to be shocked. "But you have to be careful, kid. I'm afraid that Azura Lidi already knows that you have taken away the source of the blood crystals. I'm afraid that your situation is not very good," Xiao He said again. Zhuoan nodded and said in a low voice, "Anyway, if I don't activate the Azura talisman now, I won't be teleported out. I plan to practice the Devil's Path here and raise the level of the Devil's Path. Do you want to use the blood crystals here to practice the Devil's Path?" Xiao He's eyes suddenly lit up as she asked. "Yes. The murderous aura in the blood crystals has a significant effect on my Devil's Path of Massacre. Moreover, my Devil's Path of Massacre has been stuck at the second level for a long time. It's time for me to make a breakthrough," Zhuoan muttered in a low voice. As he spoke, Zhuoan stepped into the countless blood crystals in the sky. Although the Yama Crown Prince and Diba had taken a lot of the blood crystals, it was undoubtedly a drop in the bucket compared to the huge amount of blood crystals. Terrifying mental strength swept out from Zhuowen's Niwen Palace, forming thousands of large hands that crushed the surrounding blood crystals. The murderous aura that was as thick as blood gathered around Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen directly entered the devil's path and began to absorb the murderous aura into his body. Buzz. The moment Zhuowen entered the devil's path, a strange movement came from the spirit ring. This caused Zhuowen to frown slightly. He flicked his finger and immediately released the demon-sealing green coffin. What a thick murderous aura. Zhuowen, you have to give me some of these things. Previously, you absorbed so much energy from my body. Shouldn't you compensate me? As soon as the demon-sealing green coffin appeared, the blood demon's voice sounded. His voice did not hide his desire for the blood crystals. Zhuowen did not speak, but his gaze was on Xiao He. Clearly, he was asking for the latter's opinion. It doesn't matter if you let this guy absorb the blood crystals. After all, this guy has already fused with the demon-sealing green coffin. It's basically impossible for him to escape. Moreover, the stronger the blood demon becomes, the stronger the demon-sealing green coffin will become. Xiao He pondered for a moment and said indifferently. Zhuowen nodded and said to the blood demon, "Go over there. Also, don't play any tricks. Otherwise, I will make sure that you never see the light of day again." The blood demon nodded and rushed towards the direction Zhuowen pointed at. The green coffin slowly opened and the surrounding blood crystals were immediately sucked into the demon-sealing green coffin. Zhuowen watched for a while and lost interest. He began to silently use the surrounding blood crystals to temper his demonic energy. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. At this moment, the Azura blood arena outside had become extremely quiet. After waiting for a few days, most of the warriors lost their patience and left. Only a few stayed behind. Of course, Azura Lidi, Lun He, and the Bloody Butcher were waiting silently. Azura Lidi was waiting for the source of the blood crystals. Lun He was here purely to watch the show. As for the Bloody Butcher, he was here for revenge. After all, Zhuowen was the murderer of his son, Shueluozi. Even Diba had left Azura Island 7 days ago. He was not in the mood to waste time here. After all, he still had to lead Azura Island to the Origin Society Academy to hand over the mission. Perhaps, he could obtain a spot as an honorary disciple of Sky Capital Peak in advance. Why hasn't he come out yet? Did he die in there? The Bloody Butcher said impatiently. Maybe he's recuperating in there. After all, the Yama Crown Prince is not easy to deal with. Although the young man defeated the Yama Crown Prince, he's definitely not in a good condition. Lun He said with a faint smile. Azura Lidi and the Yama Crown Prince did not say anything. Instead, they silently cast their gazes towards the Azura blood arena. Among the crowd, the two of them were the most concerned about Zhuowen. Boom. In the blood-red space, endless killing aura filled the air, causing the space to become even more eerie and blood-red. Third-level bedevilment. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were incomparably scarlet. His blood-red hair had grown to the length of his hips. Killing aura spread out from his body, causing Zhuowen to look like a god of slaughter. This kid has broken through. Xiao He stood at the bottom of the space, looking up at the terrifying demon-like figure and whispered. Boom. 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 The moment Zhuowen broke through to the third-level bedevilment, he did not stop. Instead, he clawed at the void with his right hand. Instantly, countless blood crystals around him were crushed by his grasp. Then, an even more surging killing aura spread out, spreading throughout the entire space. In a moment, the terrifying killing aura formed an earth-shattering hurricane. What is this kid doing? Is he planning to continue absorbing the killing aura and break through to the fourth-level bedevilment? Looking at Zhuowen's actions, Xiao He's eyelids twitched. Her eyes were filled with astonishment. Just as Xiao He had guessed, Zhuowen was not satisfied with the increase in strength brought to him by the third-level bedevilment. He knew that if Azura Lidi wanted to deal with him, he, Zhuowen, would have to become stronger. Only then would he have a chance to escape. Fourth level bedevilment. Zhuowen's low thunder-like voice rang out in the entire space. Then, the hurricane formed by the killing aura frantically poured into Zhuowen's body. In a moment, the blood-red color in Zhuowen's eyes became even more demonic and terrifying. The blood hair that grew to his buttocks actually showed signs of growing again. Plop. However, under the terrifying killing aura pouring into his body, even Zhuowen felt a little unbearable. His mouth actually spat out cherry-red blood, his face as pale as snow. This kid is really crazy. He just broke through to the third-level bedevilment and he can't wait to continue breaking through. Looking at the scene of Zhuowen vomiting blood, Xiao Hei was a little worried. However, she did not dare to step forward and disturb him. After all, Zhuowen was now at the critical moment of breaking through. If she did not know what was good for her and went up to Zhuowen, it would only make Zhuowen's previous efforts go to waste. Break, break, break. Zhuowen furiously roared, his blood hair fluttering. Stepping forward, he started to desperately suck in the hurricane formed by the enormous killing aura into his body. This time, he must enter the fourth-level bedevilment stage. Under Xiao Hei's somewhat dumbstruck gaze, Zhuowen waved his right hand and actually fused the terrifying hurricane into his body. Immediately, an explosive sound continuously rang out from within Zhuowen's body. Plop. Zhuowen once again spat out a mouthful of blood. However, his eyes were filled with stubbornness. At the same time, he circulated his yuan power and started to refine the powerful killing aura that he had absorbed into his body into the devil path of massacre. After nearly 4 hours, Zhuowen once again opened his eyes. A terrifying blood-red glow violently shot out from his eyes. Soon after, the blood hair behind his back once again crazily grew, reaching his feet. A terrifying aura seemed to fill the entire blood-colored space. Breakthrough? This kid really did it, really. Looking at the soaring blood-red figure, Xiao Hei's mouth was slightly agape. She did not know what to say. However, the complicated look in her eyes showed that Xiao Hei's heart was not calm at all. Swoosh. Chapter 1139. Defeating the Yama Crown Prince again. At this moment, Zhuowen's aura had unknowingly reached the peak of the Heavenly Master level. At first, Xiao Hei's attention was completely attracted by Zhuowen's breakthrough to the fourth level of the bedevilment realm, so he did not notice that Zhuowen's cultivation had also broken through. Now, Zhuowen was close at hand, so he noticed that Zhuowen's aura had increased by a lot. Not only was his demonic aura much stronger, but his martial aura had also become many times more vigorous. Zhuowen scratched his head and smiled. When I broke through to the fourth level of the bedevilment realm, I gained some enlightenment and directly broke through the barrier of the advanced Heavenly Master level, reaching the peak of the Heavenly Master level. Hearing this, Xiao Hei's gaze was a little strange. He sighed and said, "You're really abnormal. Not only did you break through 2 levels of the bedevilment realm, but your cultivation has also directly reached the peak of the Heavenly Master level. With your current battle strength, I'm afraid you only need 1 move to defeat the Yama Crown Prince. More or less." Zhuowen nodded. Before his breakthrough, he was already able to defeat the Yama Crown Prince. Now that his bedevilment state and cultivation had broken through at the same time, his strength had increased by a lot. The Yama Crown Prince was indeed not his match. Boom. While Zhuowen and Xiao Hei were talking, the demon-sealing green coffin in the sky suddenly came crashing down, causing the ground to shake violently. Soon after, the demon-sealing green coffin landed beside Zhuowen. At this moment, the green surface of the demon-sealing green coffin was covered by the blood-red color. A pungent smell of blood continuously wafted over, causing Zhuowen to frown slightly. The aura of the demon-sealing green coffin is getting stronger and stronger. It seems that the blood demon has gained a lot from the blood crystals. Xiao Hei looked at the green coffin covered in blood and said indifferently, "Since you've eaten and drunk your fill, you should repay me." Zhuowen nodded. Soon after, he softly muttered and directly carried the blood-colored coffin on his back. After which, the blood demon energy contained within slowly flowed into Zhuowen's body at a trickling speed, causing his entire body to feel warm. "Damn it! You!" The blood demon's exasperated voice came from the coffin. However, No matter how much he cursed, Zhuowen simply ignored him. The blood demon also knew that the demon-sealing green coffin was already under Zhuowen's control. Even if he cursed, it would be useless. The main reason why Zhuowen did not carry the demon-sealing green coffin on his back was that the blood demon's power had been greatly depleted in the battle with Emperor Qing. It would not be of much help to Zhuowen's cultivation. Therefore, he placed it in the spiritual ring and left it to fend for itself. However, now that the blood demon had absorbed such a large amount of killing intent from the blood crystal, its aura had increased to a level that even surprised Zhuowen. It was even stronger than when it was first sealed in the demon-sealing green coffin. Naturally, Zhuowen would not let go of such an opportunity to increase its strength. Time to go out. I don't think either Azura Lidi or the Blood Butcher will let you go. Be careful when you go out later. Xiao He suddenly said to Zhuowen cautiously. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. Now that his cultivation had reached the peak of the Heavenly Master Realm and his bedevilment had reached the 4th level, his strength was definitely above the 1st level of the Emperor Realm. He was comparable to a 2nd-level Emperor Realm warrior. If he took out the Slaughter Abstinence Violation Blade, he could even kill a 2nd-level Emperor Realm warrior. Zhuowen did not care too much about the Blood Butcher. He was mainly concerned about Azura Lidi. Azura Lidi was a 4th-level Emperor Realm warrior, a terrifying expert who had already reached the threshold of the middle level of the Emperor Realm. Zhuowen did not have the slightest bit of confidence in facing such a warrior. Let's go out first. With that, Zhuowen activated the Azura Talisman and turned into a ray of bloodlight, leaving the blood-red space. In the Azura Blood Arena, Azura Lidi and Yama Crown Prince frowned at the same time. It had already been half a month and Zhuowen still hadn't come out. Even though the two of them were extremely patient, they were starting to get impatient. Lun Jiao stood silently beside Lun He, staring at the Azura Blood Arena with interest. She had heard about Zhuowen's previous performance from Lun He. He had killed Xue Luozi, entered the strange space tens of thousands of feet underground, and fought against Yama Crown Prince who had the Azura battle halberd. Moreover, he had defeated Yama Crown Prince. Even Lun Jiao felt a little incredulous about this series of actions. Of course, she was more curious about the identity of the black-faced youth. Where did he come from? Despite his young age, he possessed such powerful strength. He was definitely not a nameless person. Whoosh! Just as Lun Jiao was lost in thought, a ray of bloodlight shot up to the sky. Then, a tall and straight figure appeared in front of everyone. Boom! The bloody butcher stared at the figure and stomped his foot. His eyes were full of murderous intent as he rushed towards the figure without saying a word. A terrifying emperor's aura spread out from the bloody butcher's body, causing heaven and earth to change color. The figure that appeared from the bloodlight was naturally Zhuowen. When he felt the bloody butcher's murderous intent lock onto him, his eyes flashed with a deep chill. He silently mobilized the Yuan power in his body to guard against the bloody butcher's sneak attack. However, the moment the bloody butcher was about to approach Zhuowen, he was blocked by a terrifying force. Taking a few steps back, the bloody butcher frowned at Azura Lidi and said, "Island Master, what do you mean by this? Are you trying to protect this boy?" Azura Lidi shook his head and said, "I have some things to ask this boy. It won't be too late for you to act after I'm done." The bloody butcher's face froze, but because of Azura Lidi's reputation, he could only nod slightly and retract the Emperor's aura in his body. However, his eyes were still fixed on Zhuowen, as if he was going to devour him at any time. Zhuowen calmly glanced at the bloody butcher. He was not surprised that the bloody butcher would do such a thing. After all, he had killed the bloody butcher's son, Xue Luozi. The conflict between the two had reached an irreconcilable point. However, what surprised him was that Azura Lidi was so calm and even said that he had something to ask him. Facing a terrifying existence like Azura Lidi, Zhuowen was naturally on high alert. "It's not bad that you were able to defeat Yama. Now, you have two choices in front of you. One is to hand over the blood crystal source and become Yama's servant. Only then will you have a chance to live," Azura Lidi said indifferently. On the other hand, the blood butcher frowned. Azura Lidi's words were clearly giving Zhuo Wen a way out. If Zhuo Wen really agreed to become the Yama Crown Prince's servant, then the Blood Butcher would still be unable to touch Zhuo Wen. What about the second choice? Zhuo Wen's eyes flashed with a cold light. Azura Lidi smiled and said, "The second choice is naturally to die. I know you're a smart person, so you should know what to choose. I'm sorry, but you want me to become the servant of someone I defeated. Do you think that's possible?" Zhuo Wen pointed at Yama Crown Prince and said indifferently, "What did you say?" As soon as these words were spoken, veins popped out on the forehead of the Yama Crown Prince as he glared at Zhuo Wen. This guy was too detestable. He actually dared to proclaim that he was defeated in front of so many people. "Isn't it a fact that you were defeated by me?" Zhuo Wen suddenly said indifferently. Yama Crown Prince's eyelids twitched when he heard these words. He could only remain silent. The fact was that he was defeated by Zhuo Wen. It was not inappropriate for Zhuo Wen to say that he was defeated by him. However, it was definitely a slap to Yama Crown Prince's face when Zhuo Wen mentioned this matter in front of him. "You only defeated me with the help of the immortal energy formed by the fusion of mental strength and Yuan Li. Do you think that's something to be proud of?" Yama Crown Prince said coldly. "Since Yama Crown Prince is not convinced, then let's fight again. This time, I won't use my immortal energy." Zhuo Wen shifted his gaze towards Yama Crown Prince and said indifferently, "You're the one who said it." Yama Crown Prince's eyes brightened. Stomping his foot, a terrifying aura gushed out. After that, the Azura war halberd appeared in his hands. A towering aura gushed out like a tsunami, causing Yama Crown Prince to look like a god descending to the mortal world. "Kill." After saying that, Yama Crown Prince shot out like a cannonball, rushing towards Zhuo Wen. Azura World Annihilation / "Without using immortal energy, I'd like to see how you can block this attack of mine." The terrifying halberd carried with it an apocalyptic might as it came crashing down from the sky. At the same time, the arrogant voice of Yama Crown Prince reverberated through the air. Azura Lidi watched everything silently. Previously, Yama Crown Prince had already recounted the battle between him and Zhuo Wen. Indeed, the reason why Zhuo Wen was able to defeat Yama Crown Prince was because of his powerful immortal energy. Now, this brat was actually so arrogant that he dared to fight Yama Crown Prince without using his immortal energy. In Azura Lidi's opinion, this brat was courting death. Bloody Butcher, Lun He, and Lun Jiao watched everything indifferently. Towards Zhuo Wen's arrogance of not using his immortal energy, the three of them sneered coldly. Zhuo Wen silently watched the halberd of Armageddon descending from the sky. Then, his eyes gradually turned blood-red, and his hair was dyed blood-red. His blood-red hair continued to grow until it reached his waist. At this moment, Zhuo Wen directly used the strength of a second-stage bedevilment. Then, with his strength of a peak heavenly master, he unleashed the annihilation. At this moment, the power of the annihilation that Zhuo Wen unleashed was many times more terrifying than half a month ago. Countless bloody phantoms came crashing down like the sky, enveloping Yama Crown Prince. "Annihilation. Destroy all obstacles." An indifferent voice slowly rang out. Zhuo Wen held the seven murderous saber and slashed out with his right hand. A terrifying blood-red saber shadow soared into the sky and slammed heavily on the annihilation halberd. Then, a terrifying explosion rang out. "Break." An indifferent voice reverberated from the explosion. Then, the Azura halberd flew out and stabbed into the ground not far from Azura Lidi. Bang! Then, a figure fell from the explosion. Azura Lidi's eyes narrowed. This figure was none other than Yama Crown Prince. Boom! Yama Crown Prince fell heavily on the ground. Then, Zhuo Wen, holding the seven murderous saber, landed in front of Yama Crown Prince. His right foot stomped on Yama Crown Prince's chest. Yama Crown Prince, who was struggling to get up, spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, Zhuo Wen stomped him to the ground again. Chapter 1140. Caught up seeing Zhuo Wen trample Yama Crown Prince, not only Azura, even Blood Butcher, Lun He, and Lun Jiao were stunned. Yama Crown Prince had been defeated just like that, and in one move. Bastard! You have also reached the peak of the Heavenly Master realm? At this moment, the Yama Crown Prince, who was being trampled by Zhuowen, felt humiliated. At the same time, he realized that Zhuowen's aura was similar to his. They were both at the peak of the Heavenly Master realm. Originally, Zhuowen was a late-stage Empyrean, and he wasn't much weaker than the Yama Crown Prince. If the Yama Crown Prince didn't possess an Empyrean artifact, Zhuowen wouldn't have feared him. Now that Zhuowen's cultivation base had reached the peak of the Empyrean realm, his combat strength was several times stronger than before. It was no wonder that the Yama Crown Prince lost to him. Boom! As soon as the Yama Crown Prince finished speaking, a terrifying Emperor's aura came crushing down on Zhuowen's body. The latter's expression changed slightly. He spat out a mouthful of blood and retreated dozens of steps. His cold gaze fell on Lady Shura. This Emperor's aura was emitted by Lady Shura. You are very bold. How dare you trample on the Yama Crown Prince in front of me? Do you want to die? Lady Shura stared coldly at Zhuowen and said word by word. Clearly, this loser wanted to compete with me, but he couldn't even take one move from me. Now that the young one can't beat me, you want the old one to come? Zhuowen sneered. The Yama Crown Prince got up from the ground and came to Lady Shura's side. He stared viciously at Zhuowen. I will give you one last chance. Hand over the source of the blood crystal and become the Yama Crown Prince's servant. Lady Shura said coldly. Zhuowen shook his head and sneered, is the blood Shura manner always so overbearing? Bullying the weak and taking things by force. What's the difference between this and bandits? Lady Shura sneered and said, you are really naive. This is Azura Island. The strong can get everything they want, while the weak can only be exploited by the strong. You are not as strong as me. Isn't it normal for you to be exploited by me? Hearing Lady Shura's words, Zhuowen's face became gloomy. Lady Shura's logic was that the strong were respected, and the weak were prey to the strong. Zhuowen knew that trying to reason in front of such a person was like playing a lute to a cow. Bloody butcher, don't you want to avenge your son's death? This is a good opportunity. However, after killing this kid, the blood crystal source will belong to my Azura blood mana. I can give you everything else. Azura suddenly grinned at Blood Butcher, who was not far away. Looking at Lady Shura's appearance, the bloody butcher cursed in his heart. Lady Shura was using him as a tool, but he had no choice but to do as he was told. Azura Li Di's strength aside, even if Azura Li Di didn't mention the fact that Zhuowen had killed Blood Luozi, the bloody butcher would have personally killed Zhuowen, the scourge in his heart. Thinking of this, the trace of dissatisfaction in the bloody butcher's heart gradually faded. Instead, it was filled with dense killing intent. He would never let go of the enemy who killed his son. Thank you, Island Master, for giving me this opportunity. Nodding to Lady Shura, the bloody butcher stared at Zhuowen with his scarlet eyes and said with a sinister smile, a vicious little bastard like you should be put to death. Today, I will enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. Hearing the bloody butcher's hypocritical words, Zhuowen sneered in his heart. However, he also knew that this was an excuse for the bloody butcher to kill him. His eyes were extremely vigilant, ready to guard against the bloody butcher at any time. Boom! As soon as the bloody butcher's voice faded, he acted without the slightest hesitation. A terrifying Emperor's aura burst out, crushing Zhuowen's body like a towering mountain. At the same time, the bloody butcher took a step forward and appeared above Zhuowen like a ghost. Third-level bedevilment. Zhuowen did not hesitate to use the power of the third-level bedevilment. The terrifying power of the demonic slaughter path attached to his body and rushed away from the bloody butcher's Emperor's aura. 3 pairs of lightning wings appeared on his back. With a step, he turned into a thunderbolt and quickly retreated. Boom! The moment Zhuowen flew away, the bloody butcher's attack arrived as expected, blasting on the ground where Zhuowen had been standing. Immediately, Zhuowen was shocked to find that the space he had been standing in collapsed inch by inch, shattering like glass. What a terrifying attack! Looking at this scene, Zhuowen felt a chill in his heart. The bloody butcher was indeed a second-level Emperor realm expert. His strength was much stronger than a first-level Emperor. Moreover, Zhuowen suspected that the Bloody Butcher was not far from the third-level Emperor realm. "Keek, you're pretty quick to escape. However, how long can you run?" The Bloody Butcher grinned, his eyes filled with ridicule. Although Zhuowen's domineering victory over the Yama Crown Prince was enough to shock him, his strength was not comparable to the Yama Crown Prince. No matter how heaven-defying Zhuowen was, it was unlikely that he would be a match for the second-level Emperor Realm expert. "Old dog. Chase after me if you can." Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he took a step forward. Under the Blood Butcher's stunned gaze, he immediately turned around and fled without the slightest hesitation. Hearing Zhuowen's insult, coupled with Zhuowen's decisive escape, the Bloody Butcher instantly fell into a state of paralysis. Of course, this state only lasted for a moment before it was drowned out by the Bloody Butcher's angry roar. "You little bastard! How dare you insult me like this? When I catch you, I won't let you die so easily. I'll let you taste all the torture in this world. I'll make you beg for death." With a roar, the Bloody Butcher took a step forward and chased after Zhuowen. When Zhuowen and the Bloody Butcher escaped from the Azura Bloody Arena, Azura Lidi and the Yama Crown Prince followed silently. Azura Lidi did not make a move, or rather, he did not even bother to make a move. He was a mid-level Emperor Realm expert. If he made a move against Zhuowen, who was at the peak of the Heavenly Master Realm, he would be overestimating the latter. Moreover, it would also damage his reputation. Therefore, he decided to let the Bloody Butcher kill Zhuowen. "President, should we follow them and take a look?" Lun Jio's eyes flickered as she asked Lun He. Let's go and take a look. Since the black-faced young man could defeat the Yama Crown Prince so easily, it won't be easy for the Bloody Butcher to take him down." Lun He's eyes revealed a trace of anticipation. With a flick of his sleeve, he led Lun Jio and followed closely behind Azura Lidi. Swoosh, swoosh. An ear-piercing sound of something breaking through the air resounded throughout the entire Azura city. Soon after, countless warriors in Azura city saw a shocking scene. In the sky above Azura city, the Bloody Butcher of the Splattering Blood Gang was chasing a black-faced young man. Behind him were Azura Blood Mana's Azura Lidi, the Yama Crown Prince, as well as Lun He and Lun Jio of the Jianing Auction House. These 5 people were all important figures in Azura city. At this moment, all of them were chasing a single person. Who is that black-faced young man? He actually attracted the attention of the 3 magnates of our Azura city. Let's go and take a look. Whispers erupted throughout Azura city. Then, many warriors felt an itch in their hearts. One by one, they used their movement techniques and followed behind Azura Lidi and the others. For a moment, the sky above Azura city was densely packed with people. These people were like a swarm of locusts. It was an extremely spectacular sight. "Little bastard. You can't escape. You'd better stop and obediently wait for your death." Bloody Butcher's loud voice resounded. Then, his right hand pressed down on the void. Terrifying origin energy gathered into a mountain-like palm and pressed down on Zhuowen. He wanted to kill him completely. Feeling the terrifying wind behind him, Zhuowen's eyelids twitched. He stomped his feet and his speed increased by a few notches. He narrowly avoided Bloody Butcher's attack. "You really won't leave me alone," Zhuowen frowned as he looked at the Bloody Butcher who was hot on his heels. At this moment, Bloody Butcher narrowed his eyes and coldly said, "It seems like I have to get serious." As he spoke, Bloody Butcher's hands quickly formed a seal. Then, his right hand patted the void. Suddenly, a blood-red wall appeared 10 meters away from Zhuowen. Slash. Zhuowen also saw the wall in front of him. He slashed out with the 7 kills blade in his right hand and heavily hacked at the blood-red wall. Immediately, Zhuowen retreated 10 steps. His right hand that was holding the blade trembled violently. The web between his thumb and forefinger was torn open, and traces of cherry-red blood flowed out. Whoosh! The moment Zhuowen retreated, a sound broke through the air. It caused Zhuowen's expression to change greatly. Immediately, the blade in his right hand changed direction and slashed behind him. Boom! Zhuowen only felt a huge force coming from the 7 kills blade. He groaned and retreated another 10 steps. His gaze was somewhat gloomy as he stared at Bloody Butcher in front of him. "Let's see where you can run to now." Bloody Butcher quietly stood opposite Zhuowen with his arms crossed. He stared at Zhuowen with a mocking gaze and a cold smile. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The moment Bloody Butcher and Zhuowen stopped and confronted each other, Azura Lidi, Yama Crown Prince, and the numerous warriors from Azura City also consciously stopped 100 meters away. They silently watched the confrontation between Zhuowen and Bloody Butcher. This kid is really unlucky. He actually provoked Bloody Butcher. It seems that his fate will be extremely miserable later. I know this kid. He is also a participant in the island origin battle. At that time, this guy killed Bloody Butcher's personal disciple, Xue Luozi, with a single slash. He has formed an irreconcilable hatred with Bloody Butcher. Now that he has been forced into such a situation, I'm afraid that things are not looking good for him. When the warriors from Azura City stopped 100 meters away, they began to discuss spiritedly. There was a slight uproar, one after another. Among them, many warriors recognized Zhuowen's identity. After all, the death of Xue Luozi in the Azura Blood Arena could be said to be a sensational event. Many people had a deep impression of Zhuowen. Of course, the reason why Zhuowen's reputation had spread far and wide was because the Yama Crown Prince had also been defeated by him. Hence, when everyone mentioned Zhuowen, quite a number of people's gazes turned strangely to the Yama Crown Prince, who was a short distance away. Chapter 1141. The Blood Butcher falls. Zhuowen slowly turned around, his cold eyes focused on the Blood Butcher. At this moment, the latter also felt the cold light in Zhuowen's eyes. He raised his chin slightly and said arrogantly, "I think it's better for you to obediently surrender. I think you know better than me how big the gap between us is." Zhuowen indifferently glanced at the Blood Butcher and said coldly, "I don't know how big the gap between us is." As he spoke, Zhuowen slashed the 7 slaughter blade in his right hand. A huge crescent-shaped blade light slashed out horizontally, cutting across the sky and sweeping towards the Blood Butcher. Boom! The Blood Butcher stretched out his right hand, and suddenly, 9 blood-red stars appeared around his body, forming an impenetrable defense. The crescent-shaped blade light slammed into the star defense, but it was unable to pass through the star defense. It was as if time had stopped, and it stopped outside the star defense. It seems like you really don't know what's good for you. A mere firefly dares to compete with the sun and the moon. The Blood Butcher coldly snorted, and the 9 stars around him began to rotate. The surging star power burst out, and the crescent-shaped blade light was directly annihilated. Is this guy crazy? He actually wants to fight with the Blood Butcher? Seeing that Zhuowen actually dared to use a move to attack the Blood Butcher, many of the warriors behind were stunned. Many of them even looked at Zhuowen as if they were looking at an idiot. If you haven't tried, how do you know that I'm a firefly and you're the sun and the moon? Zhuowen's indifferent voice rang out. His eyes were as calm as water, without the slightest hint of nervousness or anxiety. You'll find out soon enough. The Blood Butcher coldly snorted, and his feet stepped on the void. He rushed forward and arrived in front of Zhuowen. He stretched out his skinny hand and grabbed at Zhuowen's vitals. At the same time, the 9 stars around him smashed down, blocking all of Zhuowen's escape routes. 4th stage of bedevilment. Zhuowen shouted in a low voice. His blood hair grew to the soles of his feet. Terrifying murderous demonic chi erupted, forming a terrifying blood cloud in the sky. Boom! Zhuowen slashed out with his saber, and the slaughtering demonic chi exploded in the void, forming thousands of blood-colored saber shadows. It was like a heavenly moat that stretched across the sky. The 9 stars that were originally coming from 9 directions were actually blasted apart by the terrifying saber shadows. Slash! After blowing away the 9 stars, Zhuowen's 7-kill blade slashed down, heavily slamming into the Blood Butcher's right hand. After that, a muffled explosion sounded out. Next, the Blood Butcher felt an extremely terrifying power coming from his right hand. With a muffled grunt, he was forced back dozens of steps. Drip! Drip! The sound of water dripping echoed throughout the entire space. Following the source of the sound, everyone's gazes finally landed on the bloody butcher's body. At this moment, the bloody butcher's right palm was actually dripping with fresh blood. The slightly ear-piercing dripping sound was extremely ear-piercing in this space. The bloody butcher was actually injured in the confrontation just now? Looking at this scene, many people behind revealed a look of disbelief. The second stage Emperor Realm Blood Butcher clashed with a peak Heavenly Master Warrior and was actually injured. Many people thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. This guy's strength has increased again. Feeling Zhuowen's aura skyrocketing again, the Yama Crown Prince's heart trembled slightly. His pupils shrank to the size of needles, and his mouth was slightly open, not knowing what to say. Azura Lidi was also a little moved, but he was much calmer than the Yama Crown Prince. Although Zhuowen's strength was indeed strong, the Blood Butcher had not used his true strength yet. After all, the Blood Butcher's Life Emperor weapon had not been used yet. The Bloody Butcher was also stunned. But after the shock, he was enraged. He had been injured by a junior at the peak of the Celestial Master level. Although it was only a superficial wound, it was still a humiliation for a powerhouse like him. It seems that I have indeed underestimated you. However, if you think that you are very powerful after injuring me, then you are gravely mistaken. I will show you the true strength of a second-stage emperor. The Bloody Butcher suddenly calmed down, but his gaze on Zhuowen became even colder. He gently squeezed his right hand and a bloody light burst out. It circled around the Bloody Butcher's right hand, forming a bloody wheel. The surface of this blood wheel was engraved with countless small blood skeletons. What was even more strange was that these blood skeletons were actually squirming, looking extremely disgusting. My Life Emperor weapon, the skeletal blood wheel. I think it should be an honor for you to die under this skeletal blood wheel and become one of these skeletons. The Bloody Butcher's right hand gently stroked the countless small skeletons on the surface of the blood wheel, and said sinisterly. The Bloody Butcher was forced to use the skeletal blood wheel. It seems that this kid is really doomed. The skeletal blood wheel is an extremely evil emperor weapon that the Bloody Butcher refined by slaughtering tens of thousands of newborn babies. It is said that the more people this emperor weapon kills, the stronger it becomes. It may even transform into a mid-level emperor weapon. At the back, many people looked at the skeletal blood wheel in the Bloody Butcher's hand, and their eyes were filled with fear and dread. The Bloody Butcher's nickname was not groundless. Hundreds of thousands of people had died in his hands, if not millions. It could be said that his hands were stained with blood. The Bloody Butcher really does have a Life Emperor weapon. Looking at the skeletal blood wheel in the Bloody Butcher's hand, Zhuowen smelled an extremely dangerous scent. A Life Emperor weapon was very different from an ordinary Emperor weapon. It was something that relied on the accumulation of time in the Emperor Realm cultivator's body, allowing the Emperor weapon to become extremely compatible with the cultivator's strength. A Emperor Realm cultivator could unleash 100% of the power of a Life Emperor weapon. However, Xiang and the Carefree Sword did not have such a relationship. Although Xiang had refined the Carefree Sword, he could only unleash about 70 to 80% of its power. It was not as compatible as a Life Emperor weapon. However, if Xiang could accumulate the power of the Carefree Sword over a long period of time, then the Carefree Sword would one day transform into his Life Emperor weapon. Therefore, when he heard that the Bloody Butcher had taken out a Life Emperor weapon, Zhuowen's heart sank to the bottom, and his eyes became extremely gloomy. Now, you'd better die. After taking out the skeletal blood wheel, the Bloody Butcher did not hesitate at all. With a stomp of his foot, he instantly appeared above Zhuowen. With a wave of his right hand, the skeletal blood wheel carried a pungent smell of blood as it swept towards Zhuowen. Feeling the pungent smell of blood, Zhuowen frowned slightly. He swung his 7 kills saber and slashed at the skeletal blood wheel. The moment the 7 kills saber landed on the skeletal blood wheel, Zhuowen felt that something was wrong. He saw that the blood-red skeletons on the surface of the skeletal blood wheel were densely packed as they swept towards Zhuowen's face. Damn it! Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He changed his saber stance and the demonic slaughter chi turned into a blood-red barrier in front of Zhuowen. At the same time, Zhuowen continuously retreated. You can't retreat. The bloody butcher's eerie laughter rang in Zhuowen's ears. Then, more and more blood-red skeletons poured out, instantly drowning Zhuowen's figure. Hee. You overestimate yourself. You actually dare to challenge me. Looking at the figure swallowed by the blood-red skeletons, the bloody butcher's mouth was full of mockery. However, his laughter did not last long as a terrifying explosion rang out. Annihilation. Destroy everything. The deafening explosion was mixed with a clear voice. Then, the bloody butcher was shocked to find that the blood-red skeletons that surrounded Zhuowen had been annihilated. Then, Zhuowen stepped out and charged towards the bloody butcher. Slash. At this moment, the saber in Zhuowen's hand was no longer the 7 kills saber, but the slaughtering abstinence violation saber. He knew that if he did not use the Emperor weapon, he would not be able to defeat the bloody butcher, who had a Destiny Emperor weapon. The bloody butcher also noticed that the saber in Zhuowen's hand had changed. However, he did not care. After all, Zhuowen had deliberately concealed the aura of the slaughtering abstinence violation saber. The bloody butcher did not even notice it. Looks like you have some skills. However, you're still too inexperienced to slay me. The bloody butcher sneered. He held the skeletal blood wheel in his hand and charged forward, not to be outdone. The pungent smell of blood gushed out again, making people feel nauseous. If I say slash, then I will slash, Zhuowen said indifferently. He slightly bent his wrist and waved the slaughtering abstinence violation saber. Suddenly, a huge saber shadow that could shatter the sky descended from the void. It was wrapped in a heavenly aura and rumbled towards the bloody butcher. Slaughtering abstinence violation saber technique's first move, annihilation. This time, Zhuowen used the real slaughtering oathbreaking blade. He used the slaughtering oathbreaking blade technique's slaughtering oathbreaking blade technique. In an instant, the slaughtering oathbreaking blade technique's power was pushed to the extreme. Even the bloody butcher felt a trace of fear. This brat's saber aura seems to be even stronger than before. Is it just my imagination? Although he was extremely confused, the bloody butcher did not hesitate to attack. He still rushed towards the sky. Boom! When the bloody butcher held the skeletal blood wheel high in the sky, the huge saber shadow that stretched across the sky suddenly fell and slashed the skeletal blood wheel in the bloody butcher's hand. Catcher! A crisp sound rang out. Then, the bloody butcher's pupils shrank. He discovered that there were traces of cracks on the surface of the skeletal blood wheel in his hand. Moreover, these cracks were spreading at an exponential rate. Finally, they covered the entire surface of the skeletal blood wheel. Boom! In the end, the skeletal blood wheel turned into blood-colored powder. The huge saber shadow carried an indomitable force and pierced through the bloody butcher's forehead. Then, the bloody butcher stopped in mid-air as if time had stopped. After about 5 breaths, the bloody butcher roared towards the sky. Then, a line of blood began to appear between his eyebrows. This line of blood began to spread from his forehead to his feet. With a poochy sound, the bloody butcher's entire body exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Drip, drip. Chapter 1142. Exposed. Regardless of whether it was the gathered cultivators or Azura Li Di and the Yama Crown Prince, everyone fell into a tacit silence. After a brief moment of silence, an uproar broke out. Everyone stared at the blood butcher, who had already turned into a rain of blood. The sluggish look in their eyes was replaced by a look of disbelief. The second-level Emperor Realm bloody butcher's life Emperor weapon, the skeletal blood wheel, had been shattered. Even his body had perished. The one who had caused all this was a peak heavenly venerate youth. It can actually shatter the bloody butcher's skeletal blood wheel. What exactly is that bloody blade in his hand? The Yama Crown Prince felt his heart beating so fast that it almost jumped out of his chest. He had never thought that the bloody butcher would be defeated by Zhuowen. In his opinion, the possibility of that happening was minuscule. But now, that minuscule possibility had become reality. It struck the Yama Crown Prince's heart hard. That bloody blade is also an Emperor weapon. Moreover, it might be a high-grade one. Azura Lidi was silent for a moment. He took a deep breath and slowly uttered those words. His eyes suddenly burned with passion. Azura Lidi's cultivation was at the intermediate-level Emperor realm. Naturally, he had a good understanding of intermediate-level Emperor weapons. Although an intermediate-level Emperor weapon could suppress a low-grade Emperor weapon, it was impossible for it to shatter a low-grade Emperor weapon. Only a high-grade Emperor weapon could achieve such power. Moreover, Zhuowen was only at the peak Heavenly Venerate level. The bloody blade in his hand could shatter a low-grade Emperor weapon. Azura Lidi could not think of any other weapon besides a high-grade Emperor weapon that could possess such terrifying power. Just as Azura Lidi had guessed, the exterminating oath-breaking blade in Zhuowen's hand was indeed a high-grade Emperor weapon. In addition, Zhuowen had used the exterminating life from the exterminating oath-breaking blade technique, which was compatible with the exterminating oath-breaking blade. In one fell swoop, the exterminating oath-breaking blade's power had reached an extremely terrifying level. Even though Zhuowen couldn't unleash the full power of the massacre abstinence violation blade because he wasn't in the Emperor realm, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill a second-level Emperor realm expert with just a portion of its power. At this time, Zhuowen was gasping for breath, his face as pale as snow. Using the slaughter abstinence violation saber to use breaking life consumed an enormous amount of energy. For a peak Empyrean like Zhuowen, this was somewhat unbearable. Fortunately, Zhuowen's physique was extraordinary and he wasn't exhausted because of this. Instead, he quickly absorbed the blood demon's energy from the blood coffin on his back and began to replenish the abundant origin power in his body, causing Zhuowen's complexion to look much better. What? It's actually a high-grade Emperor artifact. How could a mere peak Empyrean possess such a powerful Emperor artifact? Azura Lidi did not deliberately lower his voice. The surrounding warriors were all people with extraordinary cultivation. Naturally, they could hear Azura Lidi's words clearly. Uproar, clamor, and discussion filled the entire area. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Zhuowen, their eyes emitting a greedy light. A high-grade Emperor artifact had never appeared in the entirety of Azura Island. The highest grade was a medium-grade Emperor artifact. From this, it could be seen just how shocking it was for the martial artists of Azura Island to hear that a peak Empyrean martial artist possessed a high-grade Emperor artifact. It's actually a high-grade Emperor artifact. Where did this guy come from? A mere peak Empyrean possesses such a powerful Emperor artifact. Doesn't he know that an ordinary man's wealth is his own ruin? Lun Jiao couldn't help but mutter as she watched this scene. Haha. It's mainly because the blood butcher gave him too much pressure, so he had no choice but to use his strongest trump card. Lun He replied with a chuckle, but his eyes were also filled with a rich greed. A high-grade Emperor artifact. Even a high-level Empyrean warrior would be interested in such an Emperor artifact, not to mention Lun He, who was only a second-level Empyrean. However, Lun He did not intend to be the first to stand out. The scene of Zhuowen killing the blood butcher was still vivid in his mind. His strength was about the same as the blood butcher's. If he fought Zhuowen alone, he would undoubtedly be courting death. At this moment, the surrounding atmosphere was extremely strange. No one moved. They were all staring intently at Zhuowen. Let's attack together. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. This kid is only one person, but there are hundreds and thousands of us. If we join forces, this kid will die without a doubt. If we can obtain a high-grade Emperor artifact, we will definitely soar to the sky and soar. Let's kill this kid. A loud shout erupted from the crowd. Then, the warriors of Azura City, who had gathered behind Azura Lidi, flew out like locusts. Everyone stared greedily at Zhuowen. At this moment, it was as if Zhuowen had become delicious food in their eyes. However, Azura Lidi, Yama Crown Prince, Lun He, and Lun Jiao did not move. Originally, Yama Crown Prince had planned to attack Zhuowen together with the others, but he was stopped by Azura Lidi. Father! Yama Crown Prince looked at Azura Lidi in confusion and asked. There are so many cannon fodder. Why do you want to join in the fun? It won't be too late for us to go after these people have exhausted most of this kid, Azura Lidi said indifferently. A look of understanding appeared in the eyes of the Yama Crown Prince when he heard this. His footsteps also stopped. Looking at the many warriors flying towards him, Zhuowen's eyes shone with a deep cold light. He snorted coldly and muttered in a low voice, "Since you all want to die, I will fulfill your wish." What an arrogant kid. So what if you have a high-grade emperor weapon? You are at most one person, but we have hundreds and thousands of people. Do you think you can escape from our encirclement? Among these people, the leader was a middle-aged man with a sinister look. His cultivation was also at the peak of the heavenly master realm. He looked at Zhuowen as if he was looking at a little white mouse that could be surrounded at any time. However, just as the man finished speaking, a blade light swept over. Then, without a sound, the man exploded into a cloud of blood mist. "Since you all want to kill me, don't blame me for being impolite." Zhuowen's gaze was as cold as a demon's, and the blood-red color in his eyes appeared very demonic. Not only did he not run away, but he also threw himself into the crowd. Then, he swung his right wrist, with his left foot as the center, and with his right foot as the center, he spun 360 degrees in the air. Terrifying blood-red saber chi spread out, forming a blood-red circular airwave. Poochie. In an instant, the martial artists closest to him exploded into a cloud of blood mist under the power of the blood-red blade chi. After killing the martial artists closest to him, Zhuowen took a step forward and 3 pairs of lightning wings grew out of his back. His body moved with the blade, as if he had turned into a bloodthirsty Azura. After dodging the joint attack of the numerous warriors, Zhuowen waved his right hand. The blood-red saber aura was extremely dense. It stretched across the entire sky, forming a gigantic saber shadow that was several hundred feet long. As the saber shadow came crashing down, none of the nearly 100 warriors were spared. They were all killed by the might of the saber shadow. The massacre continued. Zhuowen, who was holding the slaughtering oath-breaking blade, was extremely powerful. He was almost comparable to a third heaven emperor. However, the slaughtering oath-breaking blade consumed a lot of his energy. If not for the support of the blood demon in the blood coffin, Zhuowen would not be able to use the slaughtering oath-breaking blade's power more than a few times. Even so, Zhuowen's face became paler and paler. His right hand that was holding the blade trembled violently as if he was about to lose all his strength. At this moment, there were about 2/3 of the martial artists that surrounded Zhuowen. There were about 700 to 800 of them. These remaining martial artists were all shocked by Zhuowen's power. In just a few breaths, 1/3 of the martial artists had been killed. This speed was too fast. Thinking of this, many of the martial artists began to retreat. They were beginning to feel afraid. Zhuowen, who was holding an emperor weapon, had displayed terrifying strength. A high-grade emperor weapon consumes a lot of energy. Everyone, don't be fooled by his appearance. This kid's cultivation is only at the peak heavenly master realm. He won't be able to hold on for long. He should be an arrow at the end of its flight. Everyone, let's attack together. Just as many of the martial artists were about to retreat, one of them suddenly shouted. His words caused the eyes of the martial artists who were about to retreat to light up. Kill. After being encouraged by this voice, the remaining martial artists no longer retreated. Instead, they surrounded Zhuowen once again with bloodshot eyes. The temptation of a high-grade emperor weapon had finally defeated the rationality in their hearts. At this moment, they attacked Zhuowen without any regard for their lives. Looking at the martial artists who were charging at him with no regard for their lives, the cold light in Zhuowen's eyes intensified. He hooked his right wrist and slashed out with the slaughtering abstinence violation blade. Slaughtering destruction. A terrifying murderous aura soared into the sky, almost piercing through the sky. Then, a huge blade shadow that spanned across the horizon tore through space and fell down. Ah! Ah! Blood-curdling screams resounded incessantly. Under the terrifying saber shadows created by the annihilation saber, the warriors who had rushed forward had all exploded into a bloody mist. They were all dead. Only a dozen people had survived. Run. This lad is too terrifying. After seeing 700 to 800 people being killed in an instant with their own eyes, the remaining dozen people trembled all over. Their faces turned pale and endless regret rose in their hearts. This black-faced youth was too terrifying. He had actually slaughtered 2/3 of their remaining martial artists in one move. Can you escape? Since all of you want to kill me, you naturally have to be prepared to die. After using the slaughtering destruction again, Zhuowen's face turned even paler. Seeing that the remaining dozen people were about to escape, a cold light erupted from his eyes. He slashed out with the slaughtering abstinence violation blade again. A blood-red blade chi swept across the sky and pierced through the bodies of the dozen people. Poochie. Without exception, those 10+ people didn't even have the chance to make a sound before they directly exploded into a bloody mist, and they couldn't be any more dead. At this point, the almost 1,000 cultivators that had besieged Zhuowen had all fallen under Zhuowen's blade. Chapter 1143. Capture Few. Zhuowen let out a long breath as his face turned slightly pale. Today, he had used the massacre abstinence violation saber technique to execute the life-cleaving saber technique twice. Even he was shocked by the terrifying amount of essence force consumed. If it wasn't for the blood demon's support, Zhuowen would have collapsed on the ground. However, Zhuowen didn't dare to relax. He stared at Azura standing Azura cautiously. Azura standing Azura's eyes were filled with murderous intent and locked onto Zhuowen. Zhuowen didn't dare to move at all. Clap, clap, clap. Azura standing Azura suddenly clapped his hands. His black and red eyes stared coldly at Zhuowen. He said, "Not bad. What is the name of the blood saber emperor weapon in your hand?" It is indeed a high-grade emperor weapon, to be able to unleash such terrifying power. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "Slaughtering oath-breaking saber." Slaughtering oath-breaking saber? What a good name. However, this item will be mine. Now, I will give you a chance. Hand over the source of the blood crystal and this slaughtering abstinence violation blade. Also, cripple your own cultivation. Kneel down and apologize to Yama. Then, I will spare your life, Azura Lady said with a faint smile. Spare my life? Zhuowen suddenly sneered. This Azura's words were even better than singing. If Zhuowen really crippled his own cultivation when the time came, he would probably end up in an even more miserable state. What? You still want to resist? Although you have the slaughtering oath-breaking saber and have the strength to kill a second heaven emperor, how much Yuan energy can you unleash from a high-grade emperor weapon with your peak heavenly venerable Yuan energy? You are now an arrow at the end of its flight. Azura standing Azura crossed his arms and said indifferently. Zhuowen's eyes darkened. Azura standing Azura was right. The slaughtering oath-breaking saber was a high-grade emperor weapon, a powerful weapon made for high-grade emperors. Even activating it once required a terrifying amount of Yuan energy. Although Zhuowen was a peak celestial venerable, his strength was terrifying, but a celestial venerable was still a celestial venerable. The amount of Yuan Qi in his body couldn't compare to a great emperor, let alone a great emperor. Even if the slaughtering oath-breaking saber was an ordinary emperor weapon, it wouldn't take more than 1/10 of life emperor's oath-breaking saber. The slaughtering saber's Yuan energy was an ordinary emperor weapon. But the slaughtering oath-breaking saber was an ordinary killing oath-breaking saber. Was oath-breaking death's breaking saber. The consumption of life obliteration was even more frightening. It could consume more than 2/3 of the essence force in Zhuowen's body. If it wasn't for the support of the blood demon, Zhuowen wouldn't have been able to use life obliteration twice. Even so, Zhuowen was already at the end of his flight. He probably couldn't even unleash an ordinary attack from the slaughtering oath-breaking saber-breaking saber. Looks like you don't intend to hand it over. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being impolite. Azura standing Azura's indifferent voice rang out again. He stared coldly at Zhuowen. Then, he took a step forward and appeared above Zhuowen as if he had teleported. He pressed his hand down and terrifying Yuan energy and Emperor's aura came crashing down like countless mountains. Zhuowen felt his body sink. He had no choice but to raise the slaughtering oath-breaking saber-breaking saber in his right hand. Blood-red saber chi surged and formed a blood-red bridge in the sky. You're at the end of your flight and you still want to struggle? Break. Standing Shura's eyes were as cold as snow. His right hand seemed to be able to pluck stars and seize the moon. He descended from the sky and grabbed the blood-colored bridge in the sky. Then, he suddenly squeezed. A powerful force exploded and the blood-colored bridge collapsed. Ugh! Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood. His face turned even paler. He took a step back and retreated dozens of steps. He stared coldly at Azura standing Azura standing Azura standing Azura standing Azura. Don't make such a pointless struggle. The gap between us is too big. It's useless even if you have a high-grade Emperor weapon. Moreover, your Yuan energy is almost exhausted. How are you going to fight me? Azura standing Azura said indifferently. Blood demon. You gained a lot of benefits in that space. How did you become a dead man? I don't believe that you only have this little strength. Zhuowen clenched his teeth. His right hand suddenly slapped the blood coffin on his back. Soon after, the blood demon's sharp cry rang out. The content of his words was naturally cursing Zhuowen. However, no matter how much he cursed Zhuowen, it was useless. Zhuowen simply did not pay any attention to him. Boom! Blood-red energy poured into Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen's body, which originally felt weak, was now full of vitality. Oh! This guy! Azura standing Azura also felt Zhuowen's aura skyrocketing. He couldn't help but frown. However, he didn't care too much. With his strength at the Fourth Heaven Emperor realm, even if Zhuowen recovered his peak strength and used the slaughtering oath-breaking blade, Zhuowen would still be no match for him. Kill. Zhuowen took a step forward and a powerful force erupted. The surrounding space trembled for a while. Then, Zhuowen rushed out like a terrifying blood shadow. He took the initiative to attack Azura standing Azura. This guy is courting death. The nearby Yama Crown Prince had a cold smile on his face as he watched Zhuowen take the initiative to attack. His eyes were filled with mockery. Azura standing Azura narrowed his eyes and snorted. A terrifying emperor aura gushed out. Then, 9 huge stars descended from the sky. Azura standing Azura's natal stars were quite strange. Just like his pupils, they contained alternating black and red colors. 9-star Azura. Azura standing Azura formed a seal with his hands. Suddenly, the 9 alternating black and red stars arranged themselves in a strange trajectory and formed a huge blood shadow that was almost 100 feet tall. As soon as the blood shadow formed, a mountain-like palm descended from the sky and pressed down on Zhuowen's head. It was going to crush him completely. Zhuowen let out a low cry. With a twist of his waist, his entire body began to spin. His right hand gripped the slaughtering abstinence violation blade. Like a blood-colored storm, he hacked at Shuiying's large palm. When the blade slashed at the huge palm, a destructive force was transmitted from the slaughtering oath-breaking blade. Then, a muffled explosion erupted from the huge palm. Boom! Boom! The instant the palm exploded, a continuous explosion began to spread from Shuiying's right palm to his right shoulder. Subsequently, Shuiying let out a sharp howl. His entire right hand was completely blown to smithereens by the explosive energy. Slaughtering oath-breaking blade. If you meet a god, you kill a god. If you meet a Buddha, you kill a Buddha. After breaking Shuiying's right arm, Zhuowen's spinning body came to a stop. Shortly after, his right foot stomped on the ground and he leapt up once again. His blade moved along with him as the slaughtering abstinence violation blade slashed down on Shuiying's head. Boom! 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 Instantly, a murderous aura spread throughout the entire space. In an instant, the huge body of the blood shadow froze. Then, his huge body started to explode. Blood chi spurted out. Looking at the blood shadow that was collapsing, the Yama Crown Prince was stunned. Azura standing Azura was stunned. Lun He and Lun Jiao were also stunned. No one knew what they were thinking. How did this guy's strength increase again? The Yama Crown Prince murmured. Fear rose in his heart. This was the first time in many years that the Yama Crown Prince felt such deep fear from someone of the same generation. To put it bluntly, the current Zhuowen could kill him in one move. You actually broke my 9-star Azura. Good, very good. Azura standing Azura's gaze was extremely gloomy. With a flick of his finger, he took out a crystal-clear jade bow. It was the mid-tier Emperor artifact, the Jade Fate Bow, that was auctioned off a month ago. He put his right index and middle fingers together and placed them on the bowstring of the Jade Fate Bow. Then, he pulled the bowstring into a full moon. Terrifying yuan power gushed out from his fingertips and turned into a dazzling milky white light arrow. Shoot! Azura Li Di roared in a low voice. Immediately, an extremely terrifying light erupted from the light arrow. Soon after, a sharp and ear-piercing sonic boom resounded across the entire horizon. The light arrow was like a rapidly rising scorching sun as it arrived in front of Zhuo Wen in an instant. Damn it! Feeling the terrifying power coming from the light arrow, Zhuo Wen's pupils shrunk to the size of needles. The slaughtering oath-breaking blade in his right hand changed its momentum and slashed down on the light arrow. Boom! A firework-like explosion sounded. Then, the slaughtering oath-breaking blade's momentum pierced through the light arrow. Suddenly, countless rays of light burst out and destroyed the light arrow. Deng deng deng! Although the light arrow was destroyed, Zhuo Wen let out a muffled groan. He was pushed back dozens of steps by the recoil. His eyes were extremely gloomy. Let's see how many arrows you can take. Azura Li Di spat out these words indifferently. Then, he pulled the bowstring again with his right hand and released 3 light arrows. They surrounded Zhuo Wen from 3 different angles. Bang bang bang! Zhuo Wen raised his blade momentum and the 3 light arrows that surrounded him were destroyed. However, he didn't feel good either. His face became even paler. I can't waste my time with Azura standing Azura. Otherwise, I'll be exhausted to death by him even if I rely on the power of the blood demon. After destroying the light arrows, Zhuo Wen realized that something was wrong. His eyes flickered and he immediately looked at the Yama Crown Prince, who was not far away. A cold light burst out from his eyes. If 3 arrows aren't enough, then 4. Azura standing Azura's indifferent voice sounded. Then, he pulled the Jade Fate Bow into a full moon. Then, he loosened his fingers and shot out 4 light arrows. Destruction of life. With a twist of his wrist, Zhuo Wen used the destruction of life again. The 4 light arrows were destroyed by the huge blade shadow created by the destruction of life. The moment the light arrows exploded into countless light balls, Zhuo Wen sprouted 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back. Before Azura standing Azura noticed, he rushed out and appeared in front of the Yama Crown Prince in an instant. Bastard! The Yama Crown Prince also noticed Zhuo Wen. He roared and took out the Azura war halberd in his hand. The halberd soared into the sky and pierced towards Zhuo Wen. Chapter 1144. Yama's self-destruction bastard. How dare you touch Yama? Azura Li Di roared angrily. He took a step forward in the air and instantly charged toward Zhuo Wen. Zhuo Wen's eyelids twitched when he felt the terrifying sound of something breaking through the air behind him. He snorted coldly and stepped forward. He stretched out his right hand and pressed it on the Yama Crown Prince's shoulder. Terrifying origin energy invaded the Yama Crown Prince's acupuncture points, sealing them all. The moment Yama Crown Prince was sealed, a suction force gushed out from Zhuo Wen's palm and pulled him back. He took a step back and retreated dozens of steps. Azura Li Di arrived behind him in an instant. His terrifying emperor's aura descended. However, Zhuo Wen had retreated in advance, so Azura Li Di missed. Whoosh! More than 10 meters away, Zhuo Wen held Yama Crown Prince in his right hand and stared coldly at Azura Li Di, who had an ugly expression on his face. Zhuo Wen, what are you trying to do? Hurry up and let me go! The Yama Crown Prince shouted in fear. Azura Li Di stared coldly at Zhuo Wen and said, I told you to let go of Yama Crown Prince. Are you deaf? Are you blind? Yama Crown Prince is now in my hands. If I want to, this guy will die immediately. Are you trying to force me to kill this guy by talking to me in this way? As he spoke, Zhuo Wen's slaughter abstinence violation blade was held horizontally. The blood-red blade was pressed against Yama Crown Prince's neck, causing the latter to be terrified. Azura Lidi's expression froze when he saw Zhuowen's action. However, he did not dare to act rashly. He was really afraid that Zhuowen would go crazy and kill Yama Crown Prince. How do you want to let Yama go? Azura Lidi frowned and asked. Let me leave Azura Island and I will let Yama Crown Prince go. Zhuowen said coldly, but his eyes were extremely vigilant as he stared at Azura Lidi. He was really afraid that the latter would go crazy and attack him without caring about Yama Crown Prince's life. Father. Yama Crown Prince's body was trembling as he looked at Azura Lidi with pleading eyes. He knew that Zhuowen was a man of his words. If Azura Lidi really attacked, Zhuowen would definitely kill him without hesitation. Good. I will let you leave Azura Island, but you must keep your promise and let Yama go. Azura Lidi pondered for a moment and finally stepped aside. He stared at Zhuowen and said coldly. Seeing Azura Lidi being so cooperative, Zhuowen revealed a trace of surprise in his eyes. However, he didn't let down his guard because of this. Instead, he brought the Yama Crown Prince and retreated towards the shore of Azura Island. His gaze was fixed on Azura Lidi. At the same time, Zhuowen sent out a communication jade talisman to summon Xiang, who was hiding in a cave outside Azura City. Whoosh! A purple shadow flew over. Xiang landed beside Zhuowen with a respectful expression. The moment he arrived beside Zhuowen, he saw the murderous Azura Lidi in front of him and the Yama Crown Prince who was being held hostage by Zhuowen. While he was surprised, Zhuowen transmitted a message to him and briefly explained what had happened. Xiang also knew the ins and outs of the matter, especially when he heard that the middle-aged man in front of him was Azura Lidi. Xiang's heart was filled with vigilance. This was the island master of Azura Island, a powerful warrior who had stepped into the middle-level emperor realm. In front of such a person, Xiang would probably be killed in a few moves. At the same time, Xiang was even more surprised that Zhuowen had the opportunity to hold the Yama Crown Prince hostage in front of such an existence. It seemed that he wasn't simple. Xiang. Let's go. Zhuowen said indifferently. Carrying the Yama Crown Prince, he flew towards Azura Island's pier. Xiang nodded and followed closely behind. However, both of them were secretly on guard against Azura Lidi behind them. Humph! Damned little bastard! Azura Lidi suppressed the anger in his heart. With a step, he chased after Zhuowen and Xiang. As for Lun He and Lun Jiao, they looked at each other and followed closely behind. At this time, the docks of Azura Island were still crowded with people. Many martial artists who were depressed on Azura Island decided to buy tickets and leave this cruel and lawless island. Of course, there were also some merchants who had fished up enough profits here and were ready to go out to sea and enjoy themselves. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. That's Yama Crown Prince. When the eyes of the people on the pier fell on the young man in the black robe, they recognized his identity. Wasn't he the monstrous genius of Azura Blood Manor, Yama Crown Prince? After all, Yama Crown Prince was an influential figure on Azura Island. Naturally, there were countless people who knew about him. But at this moment, this genius of the Azura Blood Manor that everyone knew was being carried in the hands of an even younger young man in such a humiliating posture, and it couldn't help but cause many people to whisper in discussion while their gazes were extremely strange. Yama Crown Prince also felt the strange gazes of the warriors on the pier. His cheeks suddenly felt a burning heat. The resentment in his heart towards Zhuowen could be said to be even deeper. Shouldn't you release Yama now? Another piercing sound rang out. Azura Lidi had also arrived. At this moment, he stopped about 10 meters away from Zhuowen and stared coldly at Zhuowen. Azura Lidi? Where did this kid come from? How dare you use the Yama Crown Prince to threaten Azura Lidi? Everyone on the dock revealed a stunned expression when they saw the Azura who was charging over in anger. Soon after, an extremely provocative uproar erupted. Retreat 100 meters away first, then I'll let the Yama Crown Prince go, Zhuowen said calmly. Hearing this, Azura Lidi's gaze became even more unfriendly. However, When he saw the abstinence-breaking blade that was pressed against the Yama Crown Prince's neck, Azura Lidi snorted coldly and did as he was told. Seeing that Azura Lidi was so cooperative, Zhuoan nodded. With a flick of his finger, he took out the Sun-Moon Shuttle from his spirit ring. He opened the cabin door of the Sun-Moon Shuttle and said to Xiang, "You go in first." Xiang nodded and entered the Sun-Moon Shuttle without hesitation. Zhuoan's left hand condensed a blood-red energy ball and silently pressed it against the Yama Crown Prince's back. "I'll return this trash to you. Goodbye." With a push of his right hand, Zhuoan pushed the Yama Crown Prince forward. Like a monkey, he nimbly entered the Sun-Moon Shuttle's cabin. His right hand slapped the control panel and Yuan power surged in. Immediately, the Sun-Moon Shuttle's tail spewed out a dark blue gas. "Trying to escape? Do you think that's possible?" The instant Zhuoan pushed the Yama Crown Prince away, Azura Lidi laughed sinisterly. His foot suddenly stomped and he appeared above the Sun-Moon Shuttle as if he had teleported. His right hand exploded with terrifying Yuan power and blasted down. At the same time, the 9 Emperor stars around him smashed into the Sun-Moon Shuttle without any regard for their lives. Boom, boom, boom. The violent collision caused Zhuoan's pupils to shrink to the size of needles. Zhuoan and Xiang, who were sitting in the cabin, both staggered and almost fell. This old fellow has been waiting for this moment for a long time. Zhuoan's gaze was incomparably cold. His right hand slammed on the control panel and Yuan power surged into the Sun-Moon Shuttle. Instantly, the gas at the tail of the Sun-Moon Shuttle rose to the limit. Then, it turned into an afterimage and rushed into the sea of misery. Azura Lidi's expression changed slightly. He was immediately pushed back dozens of steps by the powerful force of the Sun-Moon Shuttle. When he stabilized his body, he found that the Sun-Moon Shuttle was already 100 meters away from the sea of misery. With the Sun-Moon Shuttle's speed, it would be difficult for Azura Lidi to catch up. Although he had something similar to the Sun-Moon Shuttle, the difference in speed between the two was not too great. The chances of catching up were even lower. "Bastard, consider yourself lucky this time," Azura Lidi coldly snorted. Soon after, he came to the Yama Crown Prince's side and carefully checked the latter's injuries. After finding that there were no major problems, he sighed in relief. "Father, are we just going to let this bastard go like this?" The Yama Crown Prince said fiercely. After being defeated twice by Zhuoan and being held upside down in a humiliating position in front of everyone, the Yama Crown Prince's hatred for Zhuoan was almost overflowing. "There's no other way. This kid has something like the Sun-Moon Shuttle. It's basically impossible for us to catch up with him once he enters the sea of misery." Azura Lidi shook his head and said helplessly. Even he was a little depressed. Originally, it should have been easy to get the blood crystal source and the slaughtering oath-breaking blade. However, he did not expect that it would lead to such a result. "Fortunately, you're fine." Azura Lidi patted the Yama Crown Prince's shoulder. Just as he was about to let the Yama Crown Prince leave this place with him, he saw the Yama Crown Prince's face become incomparably red. It was as if there was a huge blazing furnace in his body. "Father, I feel so uncomfortable." The Yama Crown Prince grabbed Azura Lidi. The uncomfortable expression on his face became more and more intense. Then, a terrifying energy exploded from the Yama Crown Prince's body. Boom! The blood-red energy spread out and instantly engulfed Azura Lidi. Soon after, the crowd on the dock was shocked to find that the Yama Crown Prince had exploded. Moreover, the explosion formed a blood-red explosion ball that enveloped Azura Lidi. "Ah, bastard, how dare you hold back like this? Don't let me see you in the future. Otherwise, I'll make sure you die a horrible death." The blood-red explosion ball did not last for long. Soon after, it was dispersed by an extremely terrifying energy. Then, Azura Lidi's slightly battered figure was revealed. At this moment, Azura Lidi's clothes were torn by the explosion. His hair was also messy. His eyes were incomparably red and were filled with monstrous anger. Chapter 1145. Delivering the Source Whoosh. Above the boundless sea of bitterness, The Sun-Moon shuttle dragged a long tail of blue smoke as it swept across the sea. At this moment, Zhuowen, who was sitting in the cabin of the shuttle, revealed a cold smile. Not long after the Sun-Moon shuttle left, he activated the blood energy he left on the Yama Crown Prince. That blood energy was enough to kill the Yama Crown Prince, who was at the peak of the Empyrean realm. However, it wasn't that easy to kill Azura. But to be able to kill the Yama Crown Prince in front of Azura, Zhuowen had already achieved his goal. Originally, Zhuowen had left the blood energy on the Yama Crown Prince as a precaution. If Azura had kept his promise and let him go, Zhuowen wouldn't have activated the blood energy hidden in the Yama Crown Prince's body. Unfortunately, Azura broke his promise too thoroughly. The moment Zhuowen released the Yama Crown Prince, he immediately attacked Zhuowen. Since the other party was so heartless, Zhuowen naturally couldn't be blamed for being unjust. It's time to return to the academy to hand in the mission. With a flip of his right hand, the Azura Island's source appeared in Zhuowen's palm. At this moment, the Azura Island's source was 1/3 smaller than before, and that 1/3 had already been absorbed by Zhuowen. After absorbing 1/3 of the source, Zhuowen clearly felt that his aptitude and meridians were several times stronger than before. This effect was directly reflected in the yuan energy absorption speed of Zhuowen's cultivation increased by several times. After feeling the powerful effects of the Azura Island source, Zhuowen naturally wouldn't let go of the remaining source energy. However, because this thing needed to be used as proof, Zhuowen planned to absorb 1/3 of it and leave the remaining 1/3 as proof at the academy. About half a month later, Zhuowen, who was riding the Sun-Moon shuttle, finally arrived at the auspicious Spirit Island. Under the envious gazes of countless students, Zhuowen and Xiang walked out of the Sun-Moon shuttle and immediately rushed towards the main city. After arriving at the main city, Zhuowen arranged for Xiang to return to his original residence, while Zhuowen directly walked towards the academy. Did you guys know that the Sky Capital Peak actually directly confirmed 5 registered disciples this time? What? Directly confirmed 5 in-name disciples? Wasn't the fight for the island's source only the first requirement of the in-name disciples? How could it be confirmed so quickly? You don't know, these 5 in-name disciples are the top 5 heavenly sovereign list. These 5 islands' sources are the strongest islands of the Bitter Sea. The source energy of these islands is much stronger than the other islands of the Sea of Bitterness, so you can imagine how difficult it is to obtain it. So, the people from Sky Capital Peak came and confirmed the name of the nominal disciple? Doesn't that mean the other academy's disciples has no chance? It's not that they don't have a chance. It is said that this is the first batch of in-name disciples, and the remaining ones have other requirements. If they complete the following requirements, they still have a chance to become in-name disciples. The moment he stepped into the academy, Zhuowen's ears rang about the matter regarding the in-name disciples. What caused Zhuowen to be rather surprised was that the Sky Capital Peak members had actually already decided on the 5 in-name disciples in advance. Those who can obtain the source energy of the 5 strongest islands in the Bitter Sea will be able to obtain an in-name disciple spot in advance. That's good, it will save me a lot of effort. However, Zhuowen was not alarmed, but happy instead. Azura Island was one of the 5 strongest islands in the Bitter Sea, and the source energy he obtained belonged to Azura Island. With such an island's source energy, he could also become an in-name disciple in advance. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's spirit trembled. After inquiring about the place where the people from Sky Capital Peak were going to test the island's source energy, he directly rushed towards the destination. The place where the people from Sky Capital Peak were going to test the island's source energy was the square in front of the cultivation tower. After arriving at the square, Zhuowen discovered that the square was packed with people. The flow of people was quite terrifying, and actually formed a long line. At the front of the line, there was a crystal counter. At this moment, a young man in blue was lazily sitting on the counter. Zhuowen recognized this person. He was one of the 6 inner academy geniuses that Elder Huaxia from Sky Capital Peak had brought along. The aura of this young man in blue was not weak. He had actually reached the 1st level Emperor realm. Looking at his age, he was only 27 or 28 years old. It was likely that only the inner academy could nurture such a young Emperor realm expert. At this moment, at the front of the line, a young man with hopeful eyes held a milky white ball of light and placed it in front of the young man in blue. There was a tinge of nervousness on his flushed face. Pass. You should know the rules. Leave the source energy with me and register your name. The young man in blue glanced at the milky white ball of light and leisurely kept it in his spirit ring. After registering his name, he lazily waved his hand at the young man, allowing him to leave. The young man in blue did not feel uncomfortable with the somewhat rude attitude of the young man in blue. Instead, he excitedly left the line, his eyes filled with joy. Looking at the scene on the crystal counter, Zhuowen frowned. This young man from Sky Capital Peak actually intended to take away the island's source energy. This was something that Zhuowen had not expected. Fortunately, I did not completely absorb the island's source energy. Otherwise, it would be difficult to report back. Muttering in a low voice, Zhuowen frowned slightly. Zhuowen felt a little uncomfortable with the act of taking away the island's source energy. After all, he had risked his life to obtain it from Azura Island. Now that he had to hand it over to the people from Sky Capital Peak, anyone would feel a little uncomfortable. Time gradually passed. Soon, it was Zhuowen's turn. The young man in blue on the crystal counter looked at Zhuowen indifferently and said, "Take out the island's source energy and register your name here." As he spoke, the young man in blue waved his right hand and a light screen appeared on the crystal counter. At this moment, a row of names appeared on the light screen. Among them, the most dazzling names were Evil Moon, Diba, Moyan Wushang, Qing Yin, and Di Shi. Zhuowen knew that these 5 people should have obtained the source energy of the 5 strongest islands in the Bitter Sea. Therefore, the people from Sky Capital Peak made an exception and promoted them to disciples in name in advance. Senior brother, it is said that those who can obtain the source energy of the 5 strongest islands in the Bitter Sea will be able to be promoted to disciples of Sky Capital Peak? Zhuowen asked politely. The young man in blue sized up Zhuowen and found that the latter was also a peak Empyrean warrior. The impatience in his eyes faded a little as he said indifferently, "That is indeed the case. Do you want to say that the island's source energy you obtained belongs to one of the 5 strongest islands?" Zhuowen grinned and immediately waved his right hand. He took out the source energy of Azura Island and said, "This is the source energy of Azura Island. I think Azura Island should be considered one of the 5 strongest islands, right?" "Oh, it's actually the source energy of Azura Island." Hearing these words, the young man in blue revealed a trace of caution in his eyes. He immediately took the source energy from Zhuowen's hand and observed it for a moment. At first, he was overjoyed, but then he frowned and said, "This is indeed the source energy of Azura Island. However, why is the area so small? It is half of what Diba handed over. Could it be that you have absorbed a portion of the source energy?" Zhuowen was startled. He could only brace himself and say, "Senior brother is right. I have indeed absorbed a portion of the source energy." Hearing these words, the blue-clothed youth's gaze immediately turned sharp. He sized up Zhuowen and coldly snorted, "You're quite opportunistic. However, since you've really seized Azura Island's source energy, I won't make things difficult for you. First, register your name. In a moment, I'll bring you to see Elder Grey Pavilion and let him make a decision." Zhuowen frowned. The young man in blue was very overbearing. Even though Zhuowen had absorbed a portion of the source, he had still kept a lot of it. The young man in blue didn't intend to promote him to a nominal disciple. Instead, he wanted to let Elder Huashi make the decision. However, Zhuowen also knew that the decision to become a registered disciple was not in his hands. Instead, it was in the hands of the Sky Capital Peak members who had come this time. Therefore, he nodded his head and registered his name. Then, he stood a short distance away from the blue-clothed youth and silently waited. "You are Zhuowen?" Seeing Zhuowen register his name, the young man in blue revealed a strange expression. He could not help but ask Zhuowen, "Yes. Is there a problem?" The young man in blue narrowed his eyes and shook his head, saying, "Nothing. Junior brother, wait for me for a while. After I finish this inspection, I will bring you to see Elder Huaxie." After he finished speaking, the young man in blue re-inspected the group of cultivators behind him. Zhuowen frowned. He clearly felt that when the young man in blue learned that his name was Zhuowen, his eyes revealed a trace of amazement. It was as if he had encountered something extremely shocking. This trace of emotion was very subtle, but it was still caught by Zhuowen. "Could it be that I am mistaken?" Zhuowen muttered to himself as he deeply looked at the young man in blue. After around 4 hours, the blue-clothed young man finally finished inspecting all the students who were inspecting the island's essence today. He stretched his lazy waist, glanced indifferently at Zhuowen, and said, "You, follow me." As he spoke, he walked towards the eastern side of the plaza. Zhuowen silently followed behind the young man in blue. Along the way, the two of them did not communicate at all. The atmosphere was somewhat lifeless. After walking for around an hour, the blue-clothed young man brought Zhuowen to a courtyard with a rather elegant environment. Zhuowen naturally recognized this courtyard. It was actually the study room where the headmaster of the outer academy lived. The top 10 new students had received their rewards from this place previously. After arriving at the courtyard, Zhuowen immediately saw the towering tree planted in the middle of the courtyard. At this moment, there was a chessboard placed under the tree. On both sides of the chessboard sat 2 figures. Ding! The orderly sound of chess pieces being placed resounded throughout the entire courtyard, adding a trace of quiet and spacious feeling to the quiet courtyard. These 2 figures were old men in their twilight years. One of them was wearing a white robe and had a kind face. He was the Outer Academy Dean. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.